dream. All right, good evening, everybody. So we're starting a bit early this evening compared to a regular start time, which is typically at the top of the hour. So we are kind of like 20 minutes, 30 minutes early even. We're not going to get into the review yet. I'll give more people who expect to tune in at the normal start time. I'll give them some time to join because this is actually pretty early. So for those of you that are new to the channel, we do these live streams, these Tech Thursdays live streams, as the title of the video implies. Every Thursdays on this channel, we talk about anything related to PC DIY, specifically desktop PCs. So not so much laptops, not so much servers or workstations. Occasionally we do branch out and talk about those other computer platforms, but most of the time it's going to be the desktop space. So as you guys might know, this is the launch day of Intel's new Arrow Lake CPU for the desktop. So this is their new consumer desktop. This is the successor to what is known as the 14th gen of processors from Intel. So those launched a year ago now. So fast forward a whole year, and now they are rebranding to the new Ultra series processors, which is a carryover from the laptop series. So they have the Meteor Lake CPUs that launched late last year, throughout early this year, and then they followed that up with the Lunar Lake CPUs recently, about a month ago now, and then now today we have the Arrow Lake launch on desktop. So this launch is a little bit strange. This is definitely one of the weirdest Intel launches I have ever experienced in all my years building PCs. This one by far is probably the weirdest launch ever. For one thing, the Intel Core Ultra 9 is completely missing in action. I don't know of anybody who was able to get one of those at retail. I know that the local micro center that I went to this morning did not have any of them in stock. Newegg was showing out of stock instantly. Amazon doesn't even list the product. It says it's available, I think, November 1st or something like Halloween or something. So I don't know what's up with the Intel Core Ultra 9 285K. That one is completely missing in action. My original plan today was to literally just walk into Micro Center and buy the Ultra 9 285K. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, to be honest. Is it 285K? Is it 285K? Is it the 285K? It's such a strange launch. Like the branding, everything. I talked to the salespeople at Micro Center. They were kind of like caught off guard with this launch. They told me that unlike the previous launches, Intel provided no marketing material. They had like no signage or like posters or cardboard things to put on the store to show that the CPUs are there. So there was like literally nothing. It was kind of like a silent paper launch. They had a total of one Core Ultra 5, like a total of one Ultra 5, and it sold out instantly this morning. Somebody came into the store and immediately snapped up the Core Ultra 5. Why they were so enthusiastic about buying the Core Ultra 5 is anyone's guess. I mean, we're going to look at the reviews here in a second. The only one that they had available, though, in bulk quantity was this one, which I did end up picking up. This is the Intel Core Ultra 7 265K or 265K. So this is the one that I ended up getting because I wasn't about to go to the store and walk out of there empty-handed and literally have nothing to test the new platform with. So I think that a lot of the reviews are going to show the Ultra 9 and the Ultra 5 because just like previously, just like last year and the year before, Intel provided the media and the reviewers the 9 and the 5. They did not provide the 7, which strangely enough, I kind of think the 7 is the best one out of the three of them. Like the 7 gets you all the P cores, so you get all 8 P cores, unlike the 5, which only gives you 6. And keep in mind that there's no more hyperthreading, so the P cores can only handle one thread at a time. They can't do dual thread anymore. And then the E-cores, the Ultra 9 gives you 12 E-cores. So it gives you the majority of the E-cores. The only thing you get going to the 9, you have to literally pay like $150 more or something to get the Ultra 9, and you're only getting 4 additional E-cores. I think you're getting like a tiny little bit more cash, but at the end of the day, and you're also getting Intel's thermal velocity boost, I think is what it's called, for overclocking. That's like the only other thing that the 9 has that the 7 doesn't have. So I honestly think, especially when we start looking at the power consumption numbers, I really think that the Ultra 7 is going to be the main star here. It's going to be the one that actually saves this launch ultimately, because it's kind of the middle of the road, and it gives you pretty much everything that you would need minus 4 E-cores, to be honest. So, and it runs at lower power, so it's not as power hungry as the Ultra 9. So there's that. It also runs at lower voltages as a result. So it's probably the best one, but typically for the last several, I will say since LGA 1700 and even LGA 1200, I feel like the i7 from those sockets was the best value. Slightly better value than the i5, but and a lot more value than the i9, because once you go up to the i9, you're hitting what I call diminishing returns, and you're not really getting that much more for your money. So, yeah, that's kind of my takeaway. So I walked into Micro Center, I ended up getting the Ultra 7. So I have the unboxing video up on the channel already, so if you saw that, congratulations, because it's probably the only unboxing of the CPU on the entire internet, at least on launch day. And then I also did get this. So this is the motherboard that I ended up getting. This is the Asus ROG Maximus Z890 Hero. So this way, when I do my testing and I compare it with the AMD stuff, I have the equivalent, because if you guys haven't kept up with my channel, recently we did a PC build featuring the ROG Crosshair X870E Hero. So this is the AMD version of the exact same motherboard. So like I told you guys in our motherboard coverage a few weeks ago now, the AMD, the ROG flagship brand from Asus is called Crosshair, and the Intel equivalent of that is called Maximus. So if there is a Crosshair Hero, there will be a Maximus Hero. So that is how, so that way I have an apples to apples, as equal as possible in terms of motherboard spec when I do these comparisons. So that was kind of my logic behind that. 2 years ago, when I got the 7950X, I paired that up with an X670E Gigabyte Aorus Master, and then when I got the 13900K, I got the Z790 Aorus Master. So basically, I was locked into Gigabyte's ecosystem for the last 2 years. Now, fast forward 2 years later, I have shifted to Asus, because now it's like my Intel board and my AMD board, they're both Asus. So, you know, Asus, we're locked into Asus now. So most of the overclocking content on the channel will be featuring Asus's BIOS, and everybody's probably rolling their eyes because almost every other overclocking guide on the internet is featuring an Asus BIOS. So we will show ASRock, MSI, and Gigabyte in other content in the future. So it's not like I'm forgetting about those three. Most of my content in the last 2 years has been Gigabyte and ASRock. So now we're kind of shifting focus to Asus, because I have not used Asus in a very long time until recently. So that's going to be how things are going to be on this channel. We will be doing the live stream PC build for the Arrow Lake system probably tomorrow evening, so about 24 hours from now. So if you want to stop by the stream 24 hours from now, you can expect me to be live building the Intel system with that Asus motherboard. So stay tuned for that. If you're new to the channel, get subscribed. If you like this sort of content, we kind of go in depth on these PC builds. So I don't know. So the experience that I had today was, not only could I not buy the Core Ultra 9 because Newegg didn't have it, the local Micro Center didn't have it, Amazon doesn't have it. I don't even know who else to go to. It's basically impossible to find, at least in the US. So I have no idea like what's up with the Ultra 9. Besides that, not only was it hard to find the CPU, or near impossible to find the CPU that I was looking for, in this case the flagship, there were no MSI boards. I couldn't get any MSI boards. My local Micro Center had 0 MSI motherboards, and it had 0 ASRock motherboards. So the only options for me today on launch day at Micro Center was either Asus or Gigabyte. And of the Asus boards, most of the Asus boards were there in decent quantities. And for Gigabyte, most of the Gigabyte ones, I would say probably about 40% of all of Gigabyte's announced Z890 boards were in stock at my local Micro Center. That includes the Aorus Master, as well as one of the Ice Pro or Ice Ultra or something. They had a bunch of those. So, yeah, this is a really weird launch. I've never had a problem with any CPU launch where I am unable to actually buy the CPU or the motherboard that I want on launch day, except MSI. MSI, I don't know what it is about MSI and these CPU launches. They tend to be the last one to show up with their motherboards. So that's certainly the case with the Godlike. That's completely missing in action. And the AMD version launched a while ago now, and we still have no idea where it is. So I don't know what's going on. Seems like a paper launch. Yeah, for the motherboards, for some of them, definitely ASRock and MSI, it feels like a paper launch. At least in my area. Like, it could be different in other parts of the world. But for me, I had to choose from Asus and Gigabyte, and I know how some people out there feel about Asus and Gigabyte. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, oh boy, it's slim pickings for these boards. So I was able to get the Maximus Hero. That's fine because I have the Crosshair Hero. So it's like now I have the same I have an AMD board and an Intel board that are basically the same thing from the same vendor. Which motherboard will I use for the live build tomorrow? The Asus motherboard. The Hero. That's true. MSRP was cheaper. Yeah, no, the price at Micro Center for the Ultra 9 is $650. The Newegg price is like, I think, $630. You're not going to spend money? Yeah, it's not a good idea. Okay, that leads me into my general impression of who should be looking at this Intel launch. Like, who should seriously consider getting this, or at least look at it. I'll tell you. Okay, first I'll tell you who should not get this product. So, if you have a 12700K or newer, if you have anything that says LGA 1700, if you have a CPU that has the logo that looks like this, do not buy or do not consider the Core Ultra series. It is a waste of money. As someone who literally just spent money today on the Intel Core Ultra 7, and a $700 Asus motherboard, I'm telling you, if you already have LGA 1700, save your money. It is a waste of money. I literally wasted money. But now, if I did not have this YouTube channel, would I have bought this stuff? No, absolutely not. You guys who've been watching my channel for a while, you know how many computers I have. You know how many motherboards I have access to right now. I did not need to buy this. Why did I buy this? Because of the YouTube channel, because of viewers that are interested in this sort of content, because of just having to make these objective comparisons with these different products, because this is the PC DIY enthusiast market. That is the reason why I went and bought this stuff. So, yeah. If you guys like this content, please like the video. It does help me out. I did have to spend my own money to buy this stuff. And let me tell you, dropping $700 on a motherboard that you don't actually need, that's literally the price of a PS5 Pro. I could literally have bought a PS5 Pro instead of this Asus motherboard. And that's just the motherboard. So, to be honest, like this CPU, at least Micro Center had it $20 off. Like, it was $399, so it was $400 for the CPU and $700 for the motherboard. So I spent $1,100 today, not counting the tax. So that's a lot of money on just a CPU and a motherboard, and that doesn't even factor that doesn't even include the fact that you have to also have DDR5 memory. So again, if you're somebody who is on LGA 1700, even if you have DDR4 memory with LGA 1700, you do not have the luxury of carrying over your DDR4 with this new socket. This new Intel CPU is exclusively DDR5. So no more DDR4. You cannot use DDR4 with this motherboard. It is not pin compatible. You will damage the motherboard if you try to plug DDR4 in this board. So that is another thing to keep in mind. But thanks to RK loaning me this super high-end G-Skill DDR5. This is a 48 gigabyte kit with an XMP profile for 8,400 mega transfers. So I will be using this memory tomorrow with that build to test the 8,400 memory speeds on Arrow Lake, because I think that one of the nice things about the CPU is that it does have support for CUDIM. It does have support for potentially higher DDR5 speeds, higher than what you could achieve with the 14th gen and higher than what you can achieve with the AMD Zen 5 CPUs. Although the AMD CPUs can hit pretty high speeds on DDR5. If you guys have been watching my channel recently, we have been running the AMD at 8,000. I did test, I think, the APU at 8,200, and I do need to do a couple more videos on the AMD side when it comes to DDR5 overclocking, as well as running 4 sticks of memory. So stay tuned for those videos if you're curious in that info. So yeah, this was a very, very expensive piece of hardware that I had to get. But so we will be doing the build tomorrow. I'm going to be pairing it with that RAM. What was the other thing I was thinking of, but I forgot what I was going to say. The motherboard. Yeah. So it was kind of annoying that I couldn't have access to MSI and ASRock, because I originally kind of wanted to get the MSI Ace. For some reason, every time it's time for me to buy a motherboard, MSI always hides from me. Like MSI literally avoids me. It's like, hey, last time 2 years ago, I tried to buy the X870 or the X670E Ace from MSI. That was the motherboard that I wanted for my Zen 4 build. I could never get it. So I ended up with the Gigabyte Aorus Master. And then as a result, the Intel also ended up being on the Aorus Master. So MSI always hides from me. I don't know why. I don't know, guys. I literally ranked Tomahawk as S tier in X870, and I was like, oh, it would be nice if I can get that Ace for that Intel launch on the 24th of October. And it's like, I wake up in the morning, check Micro Center, sure enough, no MSI, no ASRock. So no Nova, no Ace, no Tomahawk, none of that stuff. I can't have it apparently. So it's like, okay, well, what does that leave? That leaves Gigabyte and everybody's favorite Asus. Yes, Asus. Again, Asus. So that's why we have an Asus board to build with. But yeah, I don't know what it is with this area, but MSI is like that wild Pokemon that you can never locate. No matter how much you search. That's just how it is for me. Return it? Return it? What? How am I going to make that content? Well, see, the thing is, this is one of those things where this platform is going to grow over time. This is probably the most bizarre Intel launch. I was trying to think, what was the most recent Intel launch that was sort of like this? And the only one that I could think of was this one. So this one was the Intel 11th gen that launched in May of 2021. So this is already almost 3.5 years old at this point. But this was the last LGA 1200 socket. This was also the last 14 nanometer CPU from Intel. This one, 14 nanometer. It was the 14 nanometer. I gotta think about it for a second. Plus, 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 plus. So this was the Intel 14 nanometer plus, 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 plus. It was the last one, and this, unlike the Core Ultra, this was not a botched launch. It was just a disappointing launch. At least it didn't have blue screens. At least it didn't have problems with easy anti-cheat and de novo thinking that you're hacking because it doesn't like your E-cores. You know, it didn't have those problems. At least the 11th gen did not have those instability problems that a lot of these reviewers have been pointing out, as well as it had AVX 512. Just saying. It had AVX 512. So that was 11th gen. That was probably the most similar launch that I can compare this to. The 12th gen was pretty good, although it did have the same problems with anti-cheat software thinking that you're hacking because of E-cores. Then Intel eventually fixed that with BIOS updates and working with the developers of the anti-cheat software. And then Raptor Lake had no problems when it launched, as far as I know, although it was super power hungry. And 14th gen was just overclocked Raptor Lake. So that's where we are. That is the state of Intel currently. So it's like we're back to the way things were when 12th gen launched, although it is also coupled with the disappointment or the disappointing feeling that we got when 11th gen launched. So kind of a double whammy there in terms of negative plus negative equals negative. So this launch is overall negative. And for good reason, I would say it's mostly justified. But I don't know. I myself will be testing the CPU and the platform. I'll be making my own review video, and I will be using retail hardware, not reviewer-provided freebie hardware from Intel. So just wanting to make that clear. So I will draw my own conclusions. If you guys have watched any of my CPU review videos in the past, you kind of know my format, you know my approach. I will test at stock out-of-box settings because that is how you do an apples-to-apples comparison. Then in follow-up videos, I will do overclock settings. So what does that mean? That means when I do my review of this processor, it will be running DDR5 5600 for the review. But for like future content, I will test it with higher speed memory, like 8000, 8400, whatever. So, but yeah, the review is going to be 5600 because that is the official supported speed of the RAM out of box for regular DDR5, not CU DIMM. I'm talking regular DDR5 with a 4 DIMM motherboard. So it is no different from the 13th gen in that regard. So when I test this, I am going to test it against the 12700K, the 11700K, the 7700X, the 7800X 3D, and some other AMD CPUs. 9700X will also be in there. Some older, maybe the 5800X, I'll also test that one as well. The way I test CPUs, it's always based, for reviews, it's always based on where they sit in the price category. I am not going to test an Intel Ultra 7 against a 13900K. That is not a fair comparison. The 13900K when it was new was a $650 CPU. This is a more like a $400 CPU, so that's not fair. I will test this against the 7800X 3D though, because that is a fair comparison. Okay, so now that it's the beginning of the actual time that we're supposed to be live, let's take a look at some of these reviews. Let's look at Tech Power Up. They're pretty thorough. They test a lot of games. They test a lot of different productivity apps. But let's get into this here and let's see what these guys said. So let's just kind of look through some of the... We don't need to look at the architecture and all this other stuff. Let's see. Synthetic benchmarks and browser performance. Okay, so the first things first. IDA 64 cache and memory performance. So the Ultra 9 has 88.4 nanoseconds of latency on the memory. So this looks like the assumption that the tiles, aka the chiplets, would increase the latency from the cores to memory. And that certainly does seem to be the case. I think IDA64's numbers here are proving that. So 88.4 nanosecond latency. This could be one of the reasons why there are a lot of regressions in gaming performance in particular. But the memory, all the other numbers look fine. Like everything, the cache, all those numbers look fine. But 88 nanoseconds of latency is pretty high. For an Intel CPU, that is quite high. And I heard somebody say that this, like I said this last week, when we were talking about the motherboards, I said that this desktop line from Intel is actually derived from a laptop part. And I stand by that because this is basically Meteor Lake transplanted to desktop and with modifications made to allow it to run at much higher power limits. That's the reason why it seems to have higher latencies. Also, the chiplet or the tile-based design is not really helping in that regard. So that's kind of why things are the way they are. We look at the Y cruncher. So in this benchmark, lower is better. The fastest ones here are the Ryzen 9s. And that's because Y cruncher is one of those that really, really likes the thread count. And these just have a lot of threads. Although what's a little strange about this benchmark is the fact that the 14 and the 13900K, these are 32 thread parts. And it does look like all three of the new Intel CPUs are beating the 14 and 13th gen. So they're beating Raptor Lake, but they're losing to Zen 4 and Zen 5 in Y cruncher. So they take a little bit longer. I mean, so you can kind of see that there. The chess simulation. So here we have Stockfish. The Ultra 9 in this one beats the Raptor Lake by a marginal amount. See, the 1400K does 23.22 M nodes. The Ultra 9 is 23.77. So, but ultimately, the Zen CPUs, Zen 4 and Zen 5, do beat out the Ultra 9. In chess, in web browsing, Jetstream 2, again, here okay, that's not good. So the Intel CPUs are falling way behind in the Jetstream 2. This is basically a JavaScript, and I think WebAssembly is the other test that it's doing in this. The Zen CPUs are doing really good in this, and actually Intel's monolithic design is also doing pretty good in this. So the new Intel Ultras fall at the bottom of the pack. They actually are outperformed by the 3-year-old 12900K. And even the 4-year-old Zen 3 5950X is on par with these brand new Ultra 9 CPUs. So this is not good. So if you're someone who likes to have basically what this benchmark means, for those of you that don't know, these are JavaScript benchmarks. So if you're someone who has 50 plus Chrome tabs open with various different sites and things like that, these CPUs are going to feel very, like they're going to make your system feel like it's bogged down more quickly because of something. I don't know what it is. Is it memory latency? Is it fabric latency? Clearly, when Intel tries to do the chiplet thing, they haven't really figured out all the caveats yet. So this is where it's pretty obvious that they're behind AMD when it comes to chiplet-based architectures, because AMD's been doing this literally for 5 years now. More than 5 years. So it's like half a decade. AMD's been doing chiplets for half a decade. Intel, this is their first attempt. And, I mean, it's not terrible, considering it's close to a 4-year-old AMD part. So not horrible in that regard. The Game of Time's Killer, thanks for the sub. Welcome to the channel. But that's not good, guys. If you're someone who uses the browser very, very heavily. Even Intel's 12th gen is better than this. And that CPU is 3 years old. 3 years old. Monolithic design. So now we have web browsing. So this is the speedometer 2 benchmark. This is going to be, again, this is going to be JSON and JavaScript based benchmarks. So higher is better. So again, Zen 5. Man, if there's one thing that the new Intel Ultra is good at, it's really good at making Zen 5 look a lot better. I mean, I'm just saying, like, as someone who's just looking at these benchmarks for the first time, like, it's really making the Zen 5 stuff look better because you see the 9950X, the 9900X, the 9700X, the 9600X, all of the new Zen 5 processors are chart toppers in web browsing. So, like, that's faster than even the 4900K is, like, right up there, neck and neck with the Ryzen 5 9600X. And then you go down the stack, you have the Zen 4 parts, then you have the 13th gen, the 12th gen, the 7800X3D, and then bam, way down here near the bottom, again, you see all of the Intel Ultras just kind of all stacked on top of each other. So really weird. Really weird. Let's take a look at machine learning and AI. So here is where Intel should at least be able to leverage the NPU that is on this. So last week we looked at the 8700G with the X870 Tomahawk. That is an AMD desktop part that basically took a mobile CPU and transplanted it to desktop. And that's what the 8700G is, and that has the AI, like it's like 16 tops of AI performance there. The Intel one is a little bit less. These Intel Ultras have 13 tops, so it's 3 tops less than the 8700G. It'll be interesting to test this. Now I think about it, I want to test the integrated graphics. I want to test gaming performance of the integrated graphics and see how that is similar to the 8700G. But GPT inferencing, so here's where the Ultras are doing pretty good. They're actually doing better. They're not doing that much better than the previous generation, but they are doing the best. So that is good to see. And then the Ryzen CPUs, these don't have, is this Procyon? I forget what this one is, but they don't have that. They have to use Microsoft's DirectML to leverage the inferencing, but so they're obviously in this benchmark, they're not going to perform as well. So, and you can see from here, it's going to depend on clock speed, hence why the 9950X is the fastest Ryzen CPU in this benchmark, because it does have the highest boost clocks at stock. AI inferencing in stable diffusion. So this is another one that's interesting. So the, let's see, okay, this is kind of all over the place. So here the Ultras do pretty good as well, and then followed by some AMD CPUs. Then you got 14th gen here, all kind of interwoven with 13th gen and Zen 4. And then you have 12th gen, and then you have the rest of the pack down at the bottom. AI image upscaling. So this is one that is, you take a low-res image, like let's say it's a 360p image, and you upscale it to 1080p or 4K. In this case, what they're doing is they're taking a 1.5 megapixel image, and they're upscaling it all the way to 22 megapixels. That is actually a massive, massive upscale. That is a huge upscale. And here, it looks like when it comes to photo enhancement, the Ryzen CPUs are actually the best ones. So it took the 9950X 6.5 seconds. The 7950X was 6.8 seconds. The X3D variant was 7 seconds, and so forth. It just goes all the way down. Then you have Intel's Ultra 9, followed by Zen 3, then Ultra 7, then Zen 3 X3D, then 14900K, then this. So in image upscaling, Intel's new CPUs are better than their old CPUs. The problem is the AMD CPUs are way better when it comes to image upscaling, which is very interesting. That's an interesting benchmark. Okay, AI training, natural language processing. So this is another one for AI. And here you can see that the Intel CPUs do the best in this one. They do significantly better than everything else on this list, which is quite interesting. Image classification, again, they do really good at classifying image. So when it's training, it looks like training models for AI. The new Intel Core Ultra does seem quite good at this use case compared to everything else by a decent margin. And you also do see good, you see bad product differentiation because the Ultra 9 is the worst performer, being beaten by the Ultra 5, which is then beaten by the Ultra 7. So it's interesting how I ended up getting the best one by some fluke because of unavailability of the Ultra 9, yet this one, the Ultra 7, is actually the best performer when it comes to image classification. I find that quite amusing, actually. All right, let's talk about emulation. So the PlayStation 3 emulator. So I have tested the PS3 emulator with the 9700X recently and the 9950X, and it is very good with those CPUs. If you turn on, the platform itself, RPCS3, it claims it can use AVX 512, but it doesn't actually leverage it that well. I feel like if it did leverage it properly, I think any CPU that has good AVX 512, like the new Zen 5 CPUs, the Zen 4 CPUs, as well as Intel's previous 11th generation, I think those would probably be the best performers in this. But you can see, so Ryzen, 51 FPS, 14900K 50, and then these guys are basically the same. So there's no improvement in emulation for the Intel CPUs. Nintendo Switch emulator. So this is is this the Dolphin emulator? This one, this is Ryu Jinx. This one, the Ryzen CPUs are the chart toppers in this one, and then the Ultra ones are actually at the very bottom. So quite disappointing there. Okay. Rendering in Cinebench. This is R24. I myself have yet to start using R24. I only use R23 for my benchmarks. But R24, it is showing surprisingly good multi-thread performance. Despite the fact that these CPUs do not have hyper-threading, and they're literally running with a thread deficit compared to AMD and Intel's Raptor Lake, where AMD, the 9950X, has 32 threads. The 14900K also has 32 threads. The Core Ultra 9 only has 24 threads, and it is doing very good in multi-thread. So what this tells me is that the E-cores are very strong for what they are meant to do. In this case, the E-cores are capable of picking up the slack that the P-cores dropped when they lost the ability to do hyperthreading. So it does more than make up for it because you're dealing with a thread deficit and they are still chart topping in this benchmark. So very, very good multi-thread performance. And then you look down here. Here we have the Ultra 7. This one is a 20-thread part, and you can see that it is basically tied with the 7950X3D, which is a 32-thread part, but it is the previous generation from AMD, so this is a Zen 4 part. So that is very interesting to see. The Ultra 7 is, I would say it is punching above its weight class in this benchmark, so very impressive. The Ultra 5 is not quite as impressive, but it is still pretty decent considering it is a 14-thread part. And when you look at where AMD's 16-thread 9700X is, it is a bit faster than that one. And it's also a bit faster than the previous generation Intel's i5. So that does show that those E-cores those 8 cores are pulling a lot of weight. They are picking up the slack from those P cores. So that's really good. Single thread performance. This is what I expected to see. I said this when we were talking about the predictions. I said that the Intel Ultra CPUs would be on par with the Zen 5 CPUs when it came to single thread performance, and that certainly holds true. You guys can see 137 for the Ultra 7, so that is basically dead even with the Ryzen 9 and the Ryzen 7 in that, and then the Ultra 5 is basically the same. So it's not that much improved over Raptor Lake. And the single thread number is going to be based off of the P cores capability. So it does show that the P cores have not really made any significant improvements over the last generation. And this coupled with the fact that it is a chiplet-based design, which means that the memory latency and the fabric latency is higher than before, will explain why these CPUs are not performing that well in gaming compared to the previous generation Intel, which was a monolithic design. In Blender, very good performance for a thread deficit part. With only 24 threads, it is able to eke out a win by like 1 second against the 9950X. So that is technically a win. So that is very good. The Ultra 7 also managed to eke out a win against the previous generation's i9. So that is nice to see, although it does fall short of the 7950X 3D. And then the Ultra 5 is a little bit faster than the 4-year-old 5950X, and it is on par with the 3-year-old 12900K. Corona rendering. So this is 3ds Max. So this is another Cinema 4D benchmark. So this one, the Ryzen CPU, the Zen 5 architecture being a new architecture, shows its muscle in Corona rendering, being able to render, having the fastest time at 63 seconds, although the Ultra 9 is not too far behind, coming in at about 67 seconds, so it's about 4 seconds slower. So it is similar to the 7950X, and then a little bit behind that is the 14900K, almost tied with the 7950X 3D, and it just kind of goes down from there. The new Ultra 7 is a little bit faster than the previous generation i7, and they all just kind of fall into place. Like the Ultra 5 is a tiny bit faster than the i5, the Ultra 7 is a tiny bit faster than the i7, and so forth. So rendering in Keyshot. This one I have never heard. Oh, this is a ray tracing one. Okay, so this one is photon mapping and adaptive material sampling with dynamic lighting to provide high quality images that update instantly. So in this one, again, the Ultra 9 is doing quite good. The stock is 29 seconds. So not quite as fast as the 9950X, although it's very, very close. And the Zen 4 does very good in this one for some reason. It beats even Zen 5, which is surprising. And then everything, like I said before, just kind of falls into place. So the Ultra 9 is a little bit better than the i9. The Ultra 7 is a little bit better than the i7, and so forth. V-Ray. So here, higher is better. So the 9950X crushes everything by a wide margin. This is scoring almost 49,000. The second place is the Ultra 9 at 42,000, about 42,500, and then the Zen 4 is close to that by it's like 1,500 points less or so, 1,400 points less, and then they all just kind of like fall into place. So it's interesting seeing all these benchmarks again, because when we looked at this, when the 9950X launched, that processor was kind of underwhelming when it came time to look at the reviews. But I feel like the Ultra 9 in particular is making the Ryzen 9 flagship look a lot better than it did at launch. So very, very interesting because I look at the massive improvement compared to the Zen 4. Like that is a significant jump. And even the yeah, so I don't know, Zen 5, man, when it comes to path tracing, Zen 5 is like really good at path tracing benchmarks because wow. Like even the Ryzen 9 9900X is significantly better than the 7900X. So I don't know if path tracing, if this benchmark V-Ray in particular utilizes AVX 512 accelerators or whatever, but man, the Zen 5 CPUs are doing really good in this benchmark. And one thing to note, I want to point something out about this because soon, very soon, we are going to see the 9800 X3D. So the Zen 5 X3Ds will benefit from the new Zen 5 architecture. So all of the improvements that you guys see with Zen 5 will carry over to the X3D parts. So that this is very good news for those of you that are interested in upgrading to a 9800 X3D because things like path tracing, compute benchmarks where it's done on the CPU, this shows the muscle behind that Zen 5 architecture. So very, very interesting stuff. Software and game development, UE5. So Unreal Engine really likes Vcache because it also likes thread count because the 7950X3D is the best one for Unreal Engine 5 game development with the fastest build time, 62 seconds, so just over 1 minute, whereas everything else was a little bit slower, and it just goes slower and slower and slower. The further down you go, the less threads you have. The fact that Intel lost 8 threads and they're still on par with their previous generation is actually a good thing. See, some people are looking at this like, hey, that's fail on Intel's part. Well, not really, considering the fact that the Ultra 9 doesn't clock or boost as aggressively as the older i9, and it also doesn't have hyperthreading, and it's still able to effectively match a 14900K in software development UE5. That is quite good. And then we look at this. The Ultra 5 is not doing too well. It actually loses to the 14600K. So that is that's interesting. The Ultra 7 is basically on par with the 14700K and the equivalent priced Zen 4 CPUs. All right, software development, Git source code management. This is Git, so this is for those of you who code, and everyone who does coding is very familiar with GitHub and the file repositories for source code management. So this is that benchmark, and here it looks like this one doesn't necessarily favor thread count, although when you look at the AMD CPUs, they all line up nicely. There's linear scaling between them when it comes to the thread count. The Intel CPUs are kind of spread out, but they also look like they're actually losing to their previous generation equivalents, except for the Ultra 5. That one does actually beat its 14600K counterpart by the narrowest of margins. Visual Studio Plus, again, more software development. I'm surprised to see the Ryzen CPUs are doing very, very good. They're actually the chart toppers in a lot of this gaming development stuff, which tells me that because the Ryzen CPUs are not doing a heterogeneous architecture, like everything is P-core based and all of them have simultaneous multi-threading, that kind of explains why the Ryzen CPUs have very consistent results. Either they all win together at the top of the chart, or they're all kind of spaced out accordingly. Let's look at media encoding. So one of the things that's interesting about this CPU is that it does have the AV1 video codec on the media engine of the integrated graphics component. So that is one of the nicer things that this has. However, if you have a modern GPU, such as an NVIDIA RTX 40 series or an AMD Radeon 7000 series, you already have access to a very good AV1 encoder, which will probably outperform this Intel-based one, unless you have like an Intel GPU that has the AV1 encoder, because you don't have to subtract the power budget from the CPU to use the AV1 encoder if you're doing it on the GPU, for example. So, but for anybody else who has a much older GPU, this is a nice thing to have for media encoding, and it shows as the Ultra 9 is the chart topper in this one. The Ultra 7 is slower than only the 9950X, so that is good to see. So Intel is actually doing pretty good here overall. The old i7s are only around the newer Ultra 5 in terms of their performance, and it goes all the way down to these older ones. So HEVC, again, similar results, although Intel's older CPU, so the Raptor Lake, is very good at HEVC compared to AV1, and that's why you can see the 1400K does manage to beat the stock 285K by 0.1 second. Most people would call that margin of error, though. And then finally, the ancient H.264, also known as AVC encoding. This one is the worst quality, and it is very old. This is like early 2000s technology right here. So I do not recommend using this unless you have no other choice. But you can see that it still is relatively good. It is the best Intel-based option for a H.264, although the Ryzen CPUs are outperforming by a small, narrow margin. Okay, MP3 encoding. This is basically audio compression, and it looks like the Ryzen CPUs are very good at audio encoding, like real good compared to everything else. Interesting. Actually, they weren't good at that at all. Yeah, this is another one that's weird. Okay, so here's one. This is an example of a benchmark where Intel is showing very inconsistent behavior, because this is the second time we have seen the Ultra 7 beat the more expensive Ultra 9. This indicates a scheduling problem. At least that's what it looks like. For some weird reason, the i9 or the Ultra 9 is slower than the Ultra 7, which is quite strange. And then the Ultra 5 is down here at the bottom with the CPUs that are either old or don't clock very high, like the 7800X3D, for example, and the 5800X3D. Those don't clock very high. They don't have frequencies that go above 5 gigahertz, for example. And the Ultra 5 is basically stuck right there with the 7800X3D. So kind of disappointing, and shows very inconsistent results. So that does negatively affect the average when we look at the final results. Microsoft Office. Ryzen, the Zen 5 CPUs crush everything in Microsoft Word. Whereas the Ultra CPUs are down here with the 3-year-old Alder Lake and the 2-year-old X3D architecture, although that was really last year, but it's like technically the architecture is 2 years old now. So the 7800 X3D, and then the 4-year-old Zen 3. So quite interesting. Again, like I said, inconsistent results. This is almost like looking at a laptop part. So very weird. Microsoft PowerPoint. The Zen 4 CPUs are extremely good at PowerPoint. For some reason, the previous generation, Zen 4, the Ryzen 7000. Where is the Ryzen 9000? Wow, the Ryzen 9000 is doing worse than the Ryzen 7000. The Intel Raptor Lake is like interwoven in the middle. And then you have the, whoa, dead last, you have Intel Ultra 9. This is where you get the meme Zen 5% and Intel Ultra negative 5%. This is where you see the negative. Wow, that is regression. That is the word that defines this is regression. That's what regression means. This is an example of performance regression. Right in front of my very eyes. Microsoft Excel. Okay. The chart topper. The Ryzen 9 9950X is the best one for Microsoft Excel, followed by Intel's previous 14900K. This makes sense because those two are the most modern 32-thread CPUs from AMD and Intel, respectively. Whereas the Ultra 9 loses a lot of threads, so it's going to fall back and hang with the i7s, and even the Ryzen 5 9600X is beating a stock Ultra 9 285K. This is, I don't know what to say. Let's just kind of scoot past that. All right, Microsoft Outlook. This is surprising. Okay, email. Microsoft Office, Outlook, the 14900K is the fastest CPU at checking email, replying to emails. Wow. The 14900K, the 14700K, the 13900K, and then randomly the 7950X just shows its face and literally just like photo bombs just randomly. It's like, hey, don't forget about me, guys. It's like, what? The 2-year-old 7950X and the 13900K together forever. There they are. The rivals, Goku and Vegeta, right there. I see them again. Okay. And then I don't know what's going on with Zen 5 on this one. Apparently Zen 5's AFK on the checking your emails. And then we've got some X3D stuff just kind of hanging out in the middle at the water station. And then you've got X3D down there. And then toward the bottom of the pack, underneath the 3-year-old 12900K, we have all three of the Intel Ultra CPUs. They are slow at checking email. And then the only CPUs that the Ultra 9, 7, and 5 win against is the pathetic 13400F and the ancient 4-year-old DDR4 exclusive Zen 3 architecture, AM4. AM4 and the neutered Raptor Lake are the only CPUs on this chart that the brand new Ultra Core series is able to best in this one benchmark. Everything else, including a 65-watt TDP Ryzen 7 7700 non-X, is faster at checking email. I'm speechless. Okay, let's move on to Photoshop. Photoshop, image editing. Who's the fastest of them all? Mirror, mirror on the wall. Oh, look, the Ryzen Zen 5 is the fastest. Strangely enough, the 12 core is faster than the 16 core. And then you've got the Zen 4, then you've got some lower thread count Zen 5, then you have Intel's previous Raptor Lake flagship down there, then it just kind of goes down. So it looks like all of the Zen 5 CPUs are in the top 5%. And then you've got like Ultra and all this other stuff. All these older CPUs just kind of like mixed in here. And that's what you get. So the only thing that's kind of slow here is Alder Lake and the ancient 4-year-old Zen 3 that's stuck on DDR4 RAM. Fantastic. At least the Core Ultra is able to win against a kneecapped DDR4 running 4-year-old CPU. Fantastic result. Video editing, Adobe Premiere Pro. So here's video editing. So this is something like someone like me who has a YouTube channel. This sort of stuff is interesting to me. Now, I don't actually use Adobe Premiere. I use DaVinci Resolve, which is a lot better. It's free for one thing. So anyway, the 14900K is the fastest, followed by the 9950X. And then you've got Raptor Lake stuff and Zen 4 and Zen 5, just kind of all like interwoven up here at the top. Then you have the Ultra 9. Then you have some Alder Lake and Raptor Lake low end. Then you have the Ultra 7s. You have the lower core count Zen CPUs. And then you have the really low core count Zen CPUs. And they have the really old stuff down here. So, not a good look for the Ultra 5. To be honest, guys, when I look at this, I don't like the results that I'm seeing from the Ultra 5. The Ultra 5 seems like it's the most disappointing one. But I have a feeling it's probably also the lowest power consumption out of all these Intel CPUs. Video editing. Okay, so Adobe After Effects. Even though these CPUs are pretty bad at all the other productivity, at least they're good at Adobe After Effects, which I don't actually use. But, you know, a lot of people do. So it's nice to see that they actually win at something. But it looks like the Adobe After Effects does favor Intel's Raptor Lake over the Zen 5 and the Zen 4 and the Alder Lake. So it is interesting to see the Ultra CPUs do better than everything else in this one, except for the Ultra 5. And then 3DF Zephyr. This is another one that they do good at. I don't know what this one is. I have no idea what this is. Create 3D models. Creating 3D models is a tedious and complex task. So this is 3D modeling. I've never used this, so I don't know. But anyway, what this shows is that the Ultra CPUs, at least the higher thread count ones, are better at these type of things. But it's a mixed bag, because it's like if you take the average, you average the fact these win at the top, then they're kind of like in the middle to the bottom in this one, and then in some of these other ones they're like at the way bottom. So it's kind of like it balances out, I guess, or at the very least it comes across as inconsistent performance is what it looks like to me. I would say the word that describes these CPUs is inconsistent. They have inconsistent results. Sometimes they look good, most of the time they look mediocre, and then other times they look bad. That's kind of what it looks like. So like I said, inconsistent. Science and research. Physics simulation. Okay, they're really good at physics simulation. They're really good at physics simulation. That's one they're good at. Chemistry simulation. They're also good at chemistry simulation. So I feel like this stuff is for big pharma. This is basically big pharma benchmarks right here. So if you're someone who works in the medical industry, if you're like a biologist or a chemist or a researcher for a university working on like cancer drugs and that kind of thing, then it looks like the Ultra CPUs are pretty good at that. Medical science, genome. Yeah, see, they're okay. So, hey guys, I think I just found what the Intel CPUs are good at. They're good at medical stuff. They're good at big pharma. That's what they're good at. We found it. I found the positive. I found the selling point for the Intel Core Ultra. Thanks to Tech Power Up for doing these scientific benchmarks. Because nobody else tested any of this stuff. So, Big Pharma. Who would have thought that Core Ultra is so good at Big Pharma stuff? Man. Huh. This is like the complete opposite of gaming. This is like the complete opposite of my entire audience. Genome analysis. Very good stuff. Now, one thing that sticks out to me is how the 9700X is doing better than all the other AMD CPUs, which is really weird, which kind of tells me that these scientific programs do not know, like the scheduler is just completely either messed up or something is not written well in terms of the way this is coded. But hey, I mean, it makes the Intel Ultra CPUs look really good. Okay. Antivirus scanning. All right, let's look at some antivirus scanning. So, Avast. Avast, it looks like the Ryzen CPU. Okay, whoa. Hold on a second. Whoa. Wait a minute. The Intel Ultra CPUs are really good at Big Pharma. The AMD CPUs are really good at cyber security. This is hilarious. Who would have thought? These are things that we never actually talk about on this channel. And it's like, here we have this guy who's like super good at like science and medical research. Then we've got this stuff over here, you know, which is like really, really good at cybersecurity, encryption, decryption, antivirus scanning. Well, it was kind of a no-brainer that it's well known in the CPU world that the AMD CPUs have always been good at decrypting, decompression, cryptography, compression, file compression, etc. Because if you know anyone who's into crypto mining, you would know that CPU for the last year and a half now, CPU mining has been more profitable than GPU mining. And you know what CPUs people mine on? Ryzen 9s. Ryzen 9s. 12 cores and 16 cores from Ryzen. Why? Because they're very good at cybersecurity. That's why. So this is hilarious, though. I can't stop thinking about the fact that we found two completely different niches that these CPUs are good at. The AMD stuff is good at cybersecurity, and the Intel Core Ultra is good at medical. That is crazy. That is like the most aha moment I have had this entire week. It's like I just had an epiphany. I just realized. I just came to a moment of enlightenment. Like, I never would have thought that Core Ultra was meant for medical science. Never in a million years would I have ever guessed that. So, big shout out to Tech Power Up for testing these things. These are the things that nobody else looked at. Man, this stuff's terrible at cybersecurity. Look at that. It's like way down there. What is this? What? It's even losing to the 12900? Okay, PCB designer. Designing PCBs. This stuff looks like it scales with clock frequency and thread count. Text recognition. Google Tesseract. OCR. So, who is the fastest at recognizing text? Well, it looks like the Ryzen CPUs, the higher core count Ryzen CPUs, as well as the higher thread count Intel Ultra CPU, and then everything else just kind of falls in underneath. But man, that Ultra 5 is on that struggle bus down there at the bottom with all the lower speed and lower core count AMD and older Intel CPUs. Server and workstation. Virtualization, Oracle VirtualBox. So, okay, lower is better. Here, it looks like everything is around like 25 seconds until you get lower than the So all the Intels are averaging like 25 seconds. And then all the AMD ones, it kind of goes down from the higher clocked ones to the lower clocked ones. So yeah, interesting. So this is an interesting one. So Oracle VirtualBox has good performance on Intel CPUs. MySQL or SQL. So here again, it's kind of a weird mixed bag. What's interesting on this one is the Zen 5 is better than the Ultra, but not all of them. That has to do with the base clock speed, I guess. And then the Intel previous generation is the Raptor Lake is doing the best in this one. And the higher the thread count, the better it's doing. No SQL. They do really good at MongoDB. Well, okay, all the Intel, even the old Intel, Raptor Lake does good at MongoDB. Then Zen 5, then Zen 4, then the cheaper Raptor Lakes, the older Raptor Lakes on the Ultra 5, that just goes down to older stuff. Java, good at Java, at least OpenJDK 19, compiling. So that is not what we saw in the other web scale type benchmark, which is weird. We saw the opposite. So some of these benchmarks are really all over the place. The other thing too is the Ultra 5 does significantly worse than the Ultra 7. The Ultra 7 oftentimes is relatively close to the Ultra 9. So the Ultra 5 does look like it seems to be significantly worse than the other ones. What is this? Oh, this is ASP.NET. All right, I'm getting kind of tired of all these productivity benchmarks. Compression, WinRAR. WinRAR is notoriously single-threaded compared to like 7-zip and some of the better file compression and decompression. So yeah, see, like 7-zip is definitely more multi-threaded. So this one is actually not a very good, like WinRAR is not good, to be honest. Like especially if you're using really, really large files. So, but it is interesting that they actually benchmarked WinRAR. I almost never see WinRAR benchmarks, but the Intel CPUs do well. Zen 5 is doing pretty good. I mean, it's the same as Raptor Lake at this point. And then Ultra 5 falls behind. And then all the slower AMD and Intel Alder Lake falls in between. And then you have Ultra 5 like way down here with the slower Zen CPUs. 7-zip compression. This one, okay, all the higher the thread count, the better. So obviously the Zen 5 is going to be the chart topper because it has 32 threads and it is the newest architecture. And then you've got kind of a mixed bag of everything else. Decompression, again, the AMD CPUs are at the top, and then you have Intel's older stuff right below them, and then you have the new Ultra stuff underneath the old Intel. So very, very disappointing on the Ultra 5. The Ultra 5 is extremely disappointing in this one because this one, it actually is down here with the 5800X3D, which is not really advertised for productivity. AES encryption. So this one, okay, this is where the AMD ones are going to do really good because they're very, very good at cryptography. Like I said, the 12 and 16 core Ryzens are always like super good at this. And this is the reason why people who mine crypto with CPUs only use Ryzen CPUs. This is literally the answer. SHA-3, same thing. Although, surprisingly, here's one that I find interesting. Because this is one where I expected the Core Ultra to do worse than Raptor Lake, but it's actually outperforming Raptor Lake. And in the case of the Ultra 9, it gets close to the Ryzen 9. And then once you run it in the unlimited power mode, which is what is known to kill Intel CPUs, it can match. It can almost match the 16-core Ryzen CPUs. All right, let's look at gaming performance. So game test at 720p. Relative performance. So the Ultra, let's look at the Ultra 5. Or, well, they didn't do it this way. We're going to have to look at those reviews separately. So the Ultra 9 285K is equal to a Ryzen 5 9600X, the lower and entry level 6-core 12-thread Ryzen 5 non-X3D Zen 5 based architecture is equal to the brand new Core Ultra 9 285K at stock. If you make it go unlimited power, where it can pull as much power as it wants, it gains a massive 0.4% improvement. Now, as we go up the stack, we can see that the Ryzen 7 9700X is 2% faster. And then the 9950X is also 2% faster than the fastest new Intel. Then we go to the 13700K. It is 2.7% faster. Again, this one is 3.8. Then the 2-year-old 13900K is 5.6%. Hence why everybody's saying Intel negative 5% Ultra or whatever. Like, that's where that meme is coming from. Then you have the 7950X3D at 6.2% faster. You have the 14900K at 6.7% faster. And then finally, you have the chart topper, the Ryzen 7 7800X3D at 12.6% faster. So just from looking at the gaming performance, I would say, looking at all the productivity benchmarks that I have looked at on this review and now seeing the gaming results, if I were someone who wanted to build a content creation productivity like a pseudo workstation desktop, I would aim for the Ryzen 9 9950X, because not only is the gaming performance either the same or ever so slightly better, the productivity results are far more consistent across the board. There is no compatibility issues with big core, little core for software applications. It's just a more mature, consistent experience. And the other thing too is that I just thought of actually is the platform longevity. If you buy into the AM5 socket, you're guaranteed, X3D upgrade, Zen 6 X3D, whatever. There is a future there. Whereas with this Ultra, the LGA 1851, technically speaking, the 285K, the entire Intel Ultra 200 series is the second generation for LGA 1851. So the first generation for this socket was canceled. So it's already gone. So in Intel's mind, in their own internal roadmap, they're looking at Ultra 200 as the second generation. So this is already the second CPU for this socket. And typically Intel does 2 generations per socket. Look at LGA 1700. We had Alder Lake and we had Raptor Lake. And because Intel wasn't ready with Meteor Lake on desktop, they canceled it. And what do they have to do? They had to do a copy pasta, take Raptor Lake 13th gen, rename it 14th gen, and just overclock it slightly with slightly higher voltages and ever so slightly higher power limit increases on the boost algorithm, so they could rebrand 13th gen as 14th gen. And that's how we managed to get a third CPU on LGA 1700 instead of only 2. Whereas you can think of it like, okay, because we got 14th gen on LGA 1700, that means you have to subtract a CPU generation from the brand new LGA 1851. So that means we're already on the second generation LGA 1851. So are we going to get a copy pasta next year of Arrow Lake? Is it going to be like Arrow Lake Plus, Arrow Lake Factory Overclock Edition? and that's going to be the only other processor for this generation. So when it comes to long-term investment, it doesn't look very good. It definitely doesn't look very good compared to the competition. So that is something to keep in mind. But if I was building a productivity workstation, I would definitely go with the 9950X based off of these gaming results and all the productivity that we just looked at. So let's look at let's just skip all the way past here because we don't need to look at all this stuff. Let's skip over to integrated graphics performance. I want to see how this does in integrated graphics. So relative performance. It looks like, so the 8500G is actually weaker than an 8700G because the 8500G has, I think it's like a 760M. It doesn't even have the full 780M that we looked at last weekend with the 8700G. So this tells me that the 8700G already outperforms the integrated graphics on the new Intel Ultra series. But I will be testing the integrated graphics performance on the Intel Ultra. I want to see if I can get similar gaming experience on this as to what I was able to get with the 8700G, because that was quite impressive for integrated graphics. So we'll see. This is not going to be as good. Unfortunately, this will definitely not be as good, but it will be interesting to see how it performs. So the average at 720p, lowest settings, is 37 FPS. So not a lot of variation between the Ultra 5 and the Ultra 9. Like, all three of them are actually very close. Next, let's look at power consumption. This is something that I've been really curious to see if Intel's claims of more energy efficiency carry over. So, single threaded power consumption. 21 watts for the Ultra 7, 17 watts for the Ultra 5, 14 watts for the 7800 XTD. I don't understand where they're getting these numbers though. Like, what does this mean? This is like a single thread? Oh, I guess what they do is they measure, they're running, okay, MP3 encode CPU only, which is a single thread benchmark. Okay, that's how they did it. I guess that's a valid way of doing it. The multi-thread performance, this one, it is doing, okay, 134 watts for the Core Ultra 5, which is still, that's a little bit more power than the 4-year-old 16-core Zen 3. It's more than those X3D CPUs. The Ultra 7 is using 155 watts at multi-thread. What is this multi-thread? This is Blender. Okay, Blender. The Ultra 7 uses power between a 7950 X3D and a 9900X. The Ultra 9 pulls 235 watts under multi-thread benchmark. You know, that is interesting because that is, okay, that is kind of what I thought it would be. I suspected it would be very close to the, I said this about a month ago. I said that like if I had to guess, at the time I said that the Ultra 9 will use power between Zen 5's flagship and Zen 4's flagship. Meaning it would be less power than Zen 4 and more power than Zen 5. And that is exactly where it landed. It landed like literally right in the middle of those two CPUs. Which is interesting. This does show that the Ultra 9 in multi-thread uses the same amount of power as the 3-year-old Alder Lake i9. And that was the last Intel CPU that the Noctua D15 could handle at stock. Once we went past Alder Lake, air coolers were no longer able to contain the power, the heat, and the high temperatures of the Intel CPUs. So this is very good to see because I will only be using an air cooler with these Intel Ultra CPUs. I will not use liquid cooling with these CPUs. So average application power consumption. So the Ultra 5 uses around similar power numbers to the Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7. Although the X3D is still using a whole lot less. Even the dual CCD X3D is similar to this. It's like, what, 10 watts more, roughly, 9 watts more. But it's got way more silicon, so interesting. And then the Ultra 9 averages 132 watts, which is right around Zen 5 and Alder Lake's power consumption. But the problem is it's offering a more inconsistent experience compared to the older Alder Lake, which doesn't perform as well, I will say. But it is oftentimes outperformed by the 9950X just because of the sheer thread count advantage that the AMD CPU offers. So here we go. Gaming power consumption. This is it. This is the big one. This is the one that everybody watching is waiting to see. So, the gaming power consumption. The Core Ultra 5, 245K stock while gaming uses 61 watts. That puts it in the same ballpark as the 65 watt TDP AMD equivalents, but it still falls short of the extremely efficient 7800X3D, which uses less power than a 60 watt light bulb. In fact, this is using power like a 45 watt light bulb. That is 46 watts while gaming. But the Ultra 5 also is the worst performer in all the productivity apps. Oftentimes it falls below the previous generation Intel equivalents in a lot of cases that we looked at. So that's why this is probably the most disappointing CPU out of the pack. Then we have the Ultra 7 265K at 77 watts. This one pulls power similar to the previous generation i5s while gaming. So that is good to see. It's like now a 7 uses the power of an i5 while gaming. So that is actually a nice thing to see. Still a little bit more than the AMD equivalents though, but it's not that much more. So it is now kind of in the same ballpark, although technically it still uses more. And then we move up to the flagship, so the Ultra 9 is pulling 94 watts. So it's roughly like a 95 watt TDP, part of, like old school Intel monolithic from like 6 years ago. So they are kind of they're trending back down in power consumption. So it's good to see. Its power consumption numbers are similar to the Ryzen 9 9900X at 100 watts and the 12900K at 98 watts. And then all the higher core and higher thread count are going to have more power consumption. But compared to Intel's previous generation, it does use a lot less. Idle power, it's going to be pretty good. It looks like it's the same as all the other Intels, which is very interesting because this is a chiplet-based design, so it is good to see that their idle power consumption is very good. One of the things that I was interested in seeing, though, was not so much this. I just wanted to see the actual number, which we saw. What does this tell us with the... Oh, no, that's perf per watt. So this is kind of like how Digital Foundry does that. I think it's like joules per frame or whatever. This is similar to that. So this is how many frames 1 watt of electricity can generate. These are kind of interesting academic benchmarks, but I feel like this is still so application specific that it's doesn't really paint the whole picture. What it does indicate is that the X3Ds are the most efficient ones, which everybody already knew that. And then the Intel Ultra 5 is real good, but it doesn't perform that well in a lot of other areas. So that's why it's kind of, whatever. It's like the 9600X, same deal. Doesn't perform that well in other areas, but it's very efficient. But it does look like the Ultra 9 does provide better. It's like, what is that? Almost not twice, but it's like 70% more frames per watt compared to the previous generation. Power versus the Core i9. Power. Okay, so this one. Oh, they basically show all the power consumption numbers in a graph format. So in all cases, in every single comparison here, the new Intel uses less power than the 14900K. This is application and gaming. And then now the 9950X. So this one is actually quite interesting. In this one, against the 9950X, it wins and it loses. So in some games and in some apps, the power consumption is lower, and in others it is higher. So as an example, Cyberpunk, the Core Ultra 9 uses more power than the 9950X in Cyberpunk 2077. But Baldur's Gate 3, it also uses more power. But in other games like Alan Wake 2, the Ryzen 9 uses more power. And in Elden Ring, the Ryzen 9 uses more power. In Remnant 2, Ryzen 9 is using more power. And in some of the games like Spider-Man, it's very, very close. So it's almost the same. But technically, just looking at the graph, the Ryzen uses slightly more power. So, but this is a 32-thread part. So it is interesting to see with the new TSMC node, part of me wonders, is this efficiency gain, or I guess the question is, how much of this efficiency gain is a result of Intel's architectural changes versus how much of it is actually due to using TSMC's N4 node? Because, it's well known that TSMC has the best silicon fabrication compared to everyone else in the industry, and Ryzen is manufactured on TSMC, NVIDIA's GeForce is manufactured on TSMC, and now these new Intel CPUs are also manufactured on TSMC. So I wonder, the question in my mind is how much of these gains is a result of TSMC's node versus Intel actually focusing on making the architecture efficient. I mean, I know it's a combination of both, but I don't know what the ratio is. And that's what I'm asking. Like, how much of it, what percentage of the efficiency gain is due to Intel's architectural change versus just using TSMC's node instead of Intel's node? So that's what that is about. And then the Ryzen, compared to the Ryzen 9 9900X, again, it's the same story. Now in this one, it uses slightly more in Spider-Man than the Ryzen CPU. It kind of flipped in that one, but everything else is basically the same. And then against X3D. Now here is where it gets very interesting, because X3D doesn't run at a super aggressive clock speed on the 3D V-Cache CCD. It is capped to 5 gigahertz on that one. But the other one on the Ryzen 9 7950X3D is able to clock higher. But in this scenario, in every single case, except for Alan Wake 2 with ray tracing turned on, where even though it looks like a tie, technically, just by looking at the chart, the Intel CPU is slightly more power than the 7950X3D. But in this scenario, the efficiency, the gaming efficiency of AMD's X3D is unparalleled. It is uncontested. And this is proof of that. Whereas when we had a non-X3D, they were back and forth, but in a lot of cases, at least in the games that Tech Power Up shows, the Intel CPU is on par or using slightly less power in some of these games. And in the case of Alan Wake 2, it uses a lot less power. But you move on to comparing it against X3D, and the picture looks completely different, where the AMD CPU is way more energy efficient. In fact, none of these games, the CPU used less than 80 watts on the 7950X3D in every single one of these games except Starfield. Starfield looks like it used about 83 watts, but that was the only exception. Everything else was under 80 watts. Whereas for the Core Ultra, it used up to about 127 watts in Cyberpunk. And Spider-Man, it also used a lot of power. So that is interesting to see. And against the 7800 X3D, this, I don't like this comparison, to be honest, because the 7800 X3D, not only is it a less expensive CPU, it has less cores, it's not going to use that much power. So it's an okay comparison. I'm okay with it, but this is kind of a dumb comparison because it's like the Ultra 9 is a 24 core part, the Ryzen 7 is an 8 core part, and obviously it's going to use less power, and it has X3, so it's going to use even less power. I mean, in this scenario, the Ryzen 7 7800X3D didn't use more than 60 watts in any of the games. All games were under 60 watts. In fact, most of the games were under 40 watts, or at least under 50 watts, which is insanely efficient when you look at the actual FPS numbers that the 7800X3D provides, it being about 12% faster in gaming than this Intel Ultra 9. So let's look at, what is this AI performance? Let's see, AI performance. Geekbench AI. I mean, okay. Okay, CUDIM. Here we go. CUDIM memory is supported at launch with the new Intel Core Ultra CPUs. I have no idea how much the CUDIM memory is going to cost. I don't know when it's going to be readily available. Reviewers did have access to it, though, and it looks like the performance scaling is for, okay, so for AI, it looks linear. And then with rendering, it's not a lot of scaling there. File compression, not a lot of improvement. Y-Cruncher, I mean, there's a little bit of an improvement, but okay. Temperatures. So here we go. We're using thank you, Tech Power Up, for using an air cooler, because this is exactly how I will be testing the Intel CPU. I will not be using a liquid cooler. We're using a Noctua D15 for temperature measurements. So here we go. Measured using Blender, a highly demanding rendering load, which will load all the cores completely, but it's still realistic and it's not something fake like Prime 95. For gaming, we picked Cyberpunk 2077. Okay, very good. That's nice. All right, PL2, PL1, blah, blah, blah. All right. So here we go. Wow. Okay. Stock 88. Stock on this one on the Ultra 776. And wait. Oh no, that's not stock. That's limits removed. Okay. 72 degrees on the Ultra 7. 61 degrees on the 245. Okay. And 88 degrees on the 285K. And where is the 14900K? 87. Yeah, okay, really? Man, this benchmark does not really stress it out that much, because when I used my D15, the 13900K shoots up to, okay, well, yeah, I don't know. That's weird. But I can't help but think that this Blender benchmark is not actually, well, okay, they said it's not like Prime 95, so that makes sense. Okay, I can see why it's giving these numbers. Because I was going to say, man, D15 and 1300K is like 102 degrees with DaVinci Resolve rendering. So I don't know how accurate these results are, but I guess their Blender benchmark is kind of like cycling in a way where it's not actually pegging the CPUs at 100%, because these temperatures actually look pretty low. But it looks pretty good. It's definitely better than the previous generation. It's more in line with AMD's CPUs now. Okay, gaming. Cyberpunk 2077. These are good temperatures. 58.5. Yeah, those are really good. Those are in line with the X3D. Yeah, I'm not sure why their 7800 X3D is that hot. Mine doesn't run anywhere close to that. Mine is more like this 7950 X3D result here, this 52C. So I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, the point is, these look like, okay, 58, 53, 49. Those are good. Those are good temperatures while gaming with an air cooler. Overclocking boost and clock frequencies. So this is something that we're not going to spend too much time on, but I will do my own testing on the overclocking piece. It is interesting to see that the E-cores, the fastest E-core does get to 5.3. Yeah, it does get to 5.3. And it's consistent with all of them? No. Oh, these are different workloads. Okay. So, as they load threads, the total... Oh, I see. This is average frequency? No, this is the peak frequency, I guess, of each of these. I don't know. That's basically the voltage or the frequency curve. I don't know what this is showing. Average clock frequency versus thread count. What? Okay. Yeah, I'll look into that later. Performance summary. Applications. So, like I was saying earlier, the 9950X is going to be a more consistent performer for productivity stuff. And here it's 3.4% faster than the Ultra 9. And then the Ultra 7, the closest thing to this is the Ryzen 9 9900X. Where's so the 14700K was down there. That's interesting to see it beat the 14. So it does actually eke out a win in productivity against the previous generation Intel equivalent CPUs. But it's to the tune of 1%. And this is the reason why I said at the very beginning of the stream, if you're someone who is already on LGA 1700 or you're on AM5, basically, if you're somebody who already has a DDR5 motherboard, this generation from Intel is a complete skip. It is a complete skip. It's not worth it. And that's for all of them. Even if someone has a 14600K, they're not really getting much by going to even the Ultra 7. Gaming performance, that was looked at earlier. Again, the 9950X is 2% faster in gaming, and then it only goes up from there, considering that Intel's previous generation is 6% on average faster than the new Intel CPU. And the X3D is 12.6, so you could round that up to 13% faster than the new Intel CPU. And if you're doing price comparison, you would actually do Ultra 7 versus the X3D, and the gap is even wider between those two. So it's kind of like it's such a mixed bag. And the whole like compatibility problems with anti-cheat, like banning you from your game if you're using one of these ultra CPUs in certain games, like Valorant's not happy with it. I know Elden Ring's not happy with it. Like there's a bunch of games right now. Any of those games that are using anti-cheat engine really don't like these new Intel CPUs. So there is some kind of workaround. I have to look into that. But this is basically a complete skip. It is a huge mess right now, to be honest. And I've watched a bunch of different reviewers complain about the problems with blue screening, the problems with anti-cheat engines, not liking these CPUs, and they think that they're hacking them or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, no, you're banned. So it's, I don't know. This is definitely the messiest Intel launch that I have ever experienced. All of these Ultra 9, Ultra 7, Ultra 5, basically the new Intel CPUs, the anti-cheat engine does not like them. It will think that you're hacking, it will ban you. This is a huge problem. Or it will blue screen the computer. So if it doesn't ban you fast enough, it will blue screen the computer. So it is a huge mess right now. The last time I ran into those problems was 12th gen. Alder Lake had the exact same problems with anti-cheat when it first launched. So it's almost like Intel has regressed. Not only has there been a performance regression, there has been a regression in application compatibility, and that is definitely not a good look. So, again, I mean, it's such a mixed bag. There's going to have to be improvements. There's going to have to be patches. There's going to have to be BIOS updates. It's just weird. Performance per dollar, here we go. So, higher is better. The best performance per dollar, 12400F is a joke. So is the 3600. That is the CPU from 2019. Like, why is this here? All of these are such garbage at this point. The only relevant comparison, realistically, would be starting from here. Starting with the 8500G. And that's beating all this other stuff in terms of value. So you go down the list here. Why is there a Zen 2 thing here? Like, man, Tech Power Up needs to clean this up. Like, what is this? Used CPU prices? Like, this shouldn't even be here, man. Like, come on. This just balloons the chart, makes us look stupid. So okay, very bad value. Very bad value. Higher is better. Lower is worse. Ultra 9 is at the bottom with the Ryzen 9 950X. But I guess what are they trying to, what is this? Oh, this is application. This is such a stupid chart. Like, this is going to confuse somebody. If someone's going to build a workstation, they're never going to buy a 12400F. That is a fail. It doesn't matter if it's 259.1% better value than a Ultra 9. This is dumb. That is an ignore. Okay? Like, all this other stuff in the middle, like, they need to get rid of these old CPUs from 2019. Seriously. Why is a 3700X here? This is just noise. This is a bunch of noise. This is why I don't like charts. Sometimes these charts can be useful, but especially when you're trying to extract the value proposition, this is not... Because, see, the problem with this, the problem with showing this doesn't take into account the differences in the platform. The differences in the platform. The Ryzen 5, 3600, okay, it's $90. Whoop-de-doo. It doesn't have Thunderbolt. It doesn't have USB 4. It doesn't have PCI Gen 5, let alone the fact that it's still on DDR4. So it's basically bandwidth bottlenecked on DDR4. So it's like, it doesn't paint the full picture. So I don't like when all this noise is just stuffed into this chart and it's just going to confuse somebody. This is how you confuse people. This doesn't help. Honestly, this doesn't help. Like, why? Okay, the Ryzen 9 36, the 3900X is apparently the worst value. Meanwhile, the 3600 is all the way up here as like the third best one. This is a pointless chart. Just straight up pointless. Cost per frame. Cost per frame. Okay, this is another one. Again, there's all this, like, what? We're at the end of 2024. Is someone seriously going to consider buying a Ryzen 5 3600? Or even an 11400F? Like, this is noise. This is completely pointless. Like, okay, oh wow, of course it's going to be at the very bottom of the chart. And of course the Ryzen 950X flagship is going to be at the bottom of the chart because it's the most expensive one. Okay, we're just going to skip all these cost per frame things because there's just too many CPUs in here. There should be nothing older than Zen 3. There should not be... Technically, yeah. No, 11th gen is actually younger than Zen 3, which is kind of hilarious. But even 11th gen shouldn't be in here because that thing went EOL super fast. Okay, performance versus the i9. They just show the numbers and they don't really say... I mean, it looks like it's even. Okay, performance versus the Ryzen 9 9950X. It has more negatives, so the Ryzen 9 wins. Performance versus the... This is, by the way, this is application performance. This is not gaming performance. This is only application performance. Performance versus the Ryzen 9 7950X3D, they look even. So this one, it looks like a wash. And the Intel previous generation, it looks like a wash. So the AMD one actually wins. The AMD wins in that one. So value and conclusion. Okay. The pros, excellent performance in heavy multi-threaded apps. That is true. For the Ultra 9, it does have surprisingly good multi-thread performance, despite the fact that it no longer has hyper-threading on the P-cores. Good energy efficiency compared to Intel's old ones, yes. Not so much compared to AMD, although it is kind of on par with AMD now, at least the non-X3D variants. Easy to keep cool, that's true. I will be using an air cooler with mine. Gen 5 SSD. Okay, here's a big one. Here's a big one because this is a big, giant... This thing stuck out like a sore thumb on Z790. So this is a huge improvement with the new motherboards. Finally, PCI Gen 5, one PCI Gen 5 SSD without compromising GPU bandwidth. This means Z790 is finally equal to X870E. Now, Intel and AMD both offer one Gen 5 SSD without taking lanes from the graphics card. Previously, AMD offered two Gen 5 with up to 2 Gen 5 without taking GPU lanes. However, because of USB 4, now the newer AMD motherboards only offer one, with a few notable exceptions from MSI, because MSI was smart and figured out a secret technique to share the second Gen 5 lanes with the USB 4 controller, therefore avoiding GPU lane sharing. The motherboards that offer this are the X870E Godlike and the X870 Tomahawk. Those are the only two motherboards that offer two Gen 5 SSDs without taking lanes from the graphics card. Every other motherboard, including all of the new Intel motherboards and every other AMD motherboard, if they offer a second or third Gen 5 SSD, they are doing GPU lane sharing. So this is a massive improvement for Intel because Intel never had this capability until now. Overclocking unlocked. Good memory. Okay, well, that's... Why is this here? Good... This is like... What? Isn't this like default? Understood. Good memory support. Well over... Okay, that's... I mean, okay, yeah. Integrated GPU, yes. iGPU performance doubled versus Raptor Lake. That's good. Well, I don't know why this is here. This shouldn't be here, and this shouldn't be here either. Support for Thunderbolt 4 and 5, Wi-Fi 6, and 7. Okay, that's good. That means they have parity. Although the one thing that is improved is Thunderbolt 5 is available on some, albeit very expensive, Z890 boards. So just keep that in mind. NPU included, 3 nanometer production process, and those are the good things. The bad things: gaming performance is lower than Raptor Lake. Slower than Raptor Lake. Some games and applications aren't currently performing well at all. This is the dreaded anti-cheat banning you because it thinks that you're cheating when you're not. It just so happens you have an Intel Core Ultra CPU, so it thinks you're cheating, so you get banned. Or it blue screens the computer. Requires new motherboard with socket LGA 1851. That is true. That is definitely like this because you got to buy a new motherboard. No more support for DDR4 memory. That is again no. Well, that I don't care because come on, DDR4 has been around since 10 years ago. DDR4 is 10 years old. It needs to go away. No support for AVX 512. Okay, so those are the negatives. Okay. Let's just briefly, so we'll just skip straight to the conclusion on the Ultra 7. Value and conclusion. So here we go. The Ultra 7. The Intel Core Ultra 7. Excellent application performance, beats the Ryzen 9 9900X in application performance, solid price, and that is pretty interesting because this is a 20-thread Intel versus a 24-thread AMD, and it's beating it in application performance, and it has no hyper-threading. Solid pricing given the performance. 8 Lion Cove P cores, just 4 E cores missing compared to the 285K. So they're saying this is a pro, not a con. I would tend to agree because, like I said at the beginning, I feel like out of the 3 Intel Ultra CPUs, I think the Ultra 7 is actually the best one. It uses less power than the Ultra 9. It has all the P cores that the Ultra 9 offers, and it's only missing 4 E cores. So yeah, I do agree. This is definitely a positive. Good energy efficiency. It also costs a lot less, so it can justify those 4 missing E cores. Good energy efficiency, easy to keep cool. Okay, it's the same thing here. Okay, everything is the same. All right, and then the negatives. High price for a 7-position CPU. I don't really agree with this. I don't feel like this is any different price-wise than anything else, so I don't agree with that. That should not be there. Gaming performance lower. I don't really know what they mean by this. Gaming performance lower than... Okay, some games are... require this. No, okay, so same thing. So the only difference is, according to Tech Power Up, the additional thing is that the Ultra 7 beats the similarly priced Ryzen 9 9900X, but it has a high price. The Ultra 7 is expensive, according to Tech Power Up. So that's the only difference between the Ultra 9. And then the Ultra 5, if we skip to the end, if this will actually... Okay, there we go. So, okay, very good application performance, beats Ryzen 7 9700X in applications. And high price for a 5-position. So what is this? I don't really think this is any different in the price, though, compared to previous gen. So, I don't know. Overall, it is such a mixed bag, and it has so many weird quirks at launch that don't make for a very good look, nor does it make for a very smooth launch. The fact that you can't buy the Ultra 9 is also concerning. That makes me wonder if Intel's not liking the fact that they have to pay TSMC to manufacture these. So that means that we could be looking at low stock and low availability for the higher end SKU. The other thing too is, what's up with the motherboards? Like, why is it hard to find the MSI boards and the ASRock boards? I mean, it's pretty easy to find the Asus boards and the Gigabyte ones, but everything else is kind of hard to find. At least at launch, which is really weird. That was never the case with the 13th gen launch 2 years ago. So, what do you guys think? What do you guys think about this new Intel CPU generation? Wait, you can already pre-order a 9800X3D? For real? Oh, you're right. Wait, is it? Oh, you're right. It does launch when the PS5 Pro launches. The 9800X3 launches the exact same day as the PS5 Pro. CUDIM, Nero, we already looked at CUDIM. We looked at CUDIM in here. They show CUDIM benchmarks. So let's go look at that again. Here's CUDIM. So GPT inferencing, it does do good. But in rendering and file compression and Y Cruncher, it didn't do good. What I don't understand is why they didn't do any gaming comparisons, but I don't really think the results will be any different from what Y Cruncher shows, to be honest. So, I don't know. Like, when I look at this, when I see the Ryzen 9 actually better than the new Intel, so let's talk about the Ultra 9. The Ultra 9 is the only CPU in the pack that has thermal velocity boost. So in terms of overclocking, the Ultra 9 is going to be the most interesting one feature-wise, but I really think the lower power Ultra 5 and Ultra 7 will probably be better overclockers, or they'll be easier to see percentage gains from overclocking because they use less power from the start. So it's kind of a wash. It's one of those things where as soon as you start talking about overclocking, like it's someone can easily, because I always see those arguments. It's like, I can already see it now. You know, people are gonna be like, oh well, yeah, the 1400K is faster at stock, but I can overclock the Ultra 9 to match it or exceed it. Well, okay, you know, anytime someone says that, it's like you do realize that the 1400K can also be overclocked, although it's already, to its credit, it's already running pretty much at the limit out of the box. So there's not a whole lot of margin left for overclocking a 1400K. The Ryzen, though. This thing, the Zen 5 CPU, is so much fun to overclock because of Curve Shaper. And especially if you have a motherboard that has asynchronous mode for B-clock modification. So, yeah, I don't buy the whole overclocking thing. Although it will be fun to overclock these CPUs. Because Zen 5 being more efficient than Zen 4 means that it's more fun to overclock. Same deal with Intel Ultra. Intel Ultra uses less power than Raptor Lake, which means it will be more fun to overclock. So, you know, like if you like overclocking, I think these CPUs are like Zen 5 and Intel Ultra are way more fun than the existing older CPUs. You would wait for the 9950X3D, considering you only getting one gen out of these new motherboards. It's a hard sell. Yeah, that is probably one of the hardest things about it, is the fact that it's not going to have very long longevity. The socket's not going to have a long lifespan, guys. Like, that's the reality. Let me go to performance summary. So yeah, here, see, like, this is why what I was saying in the beginning. If I was going to build a productivity machine, like if I was going to build one computer that could do everything, like edit videos, 3D rendering, whatever, you know, all the stuff that we looked at, like all the, well, okay, not the medical stuff, not the cybersecurity stuff, forget about those things. Just like all the other stuff, all the creativity things, productivity things, the gaming things, all that stuff. If I was going to choose one processor for the most consistent experience, I've already gotten it. 9950X. 9950X. Especially if we want to talk about 4K gaming. 4K gaming. The other thing too is, let's go to 4K real quick. 4K gaming. Look at this. At 4K gaming, the fastest gaming CPU, the 7800X3, everybody's favorite gaming CPU, is only a whopping 2.3% faster than the Ultra 9 285K at 4K gaming. The 7950X3D is a whopping 2.1% faster. The 14900K, 1.5% faster. 13900K, 1.3% faster. And then it just kind of goes down. The 9950X is 0.6% faster than the Ultra 9 at 4K gaming. Why am I bringing up 4K gaming? Why do you guys think I'm bringing up 4K gaming? Because what did I talk about? What did I just say? If I was going to build a single computer that could do it all, it can do editing, it can do programming, it can do editing work, dev work, virtual machines for whatever, like game server or whatever, home server. You know, like if I was going to do one machine that could do everything with the most consistent experience, I got to give the recommendation to this. Just from what we've looked at, just from Tech Power Up's review, 9950X. 9950X. And why am I mentioning 4K? Because if somebody is serious about content creation and productivity, the 4K monitor is the way to go. 4K monitor plus more monitors is the way to go. That is how it works. If you're doing design work, if you're doing video editing work, and if you're serious, you're on a 4K monitor. Just saying. So all this stuff about, well, most people game at 1080p. You know, I don't care. I don't care because that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about a content creation / gaming, a do it all in one. It does it all. Today, the best CPU for that job, 9950X. Most consistent experience. It beats the Ultra 9 in gaming. They use the same power, roughly, while like average out to almost the same power. You know, it's in some scenarios, the Ryzen uses less. In others, the new Intel Ultra uses less. So they kind of balance out. So they're on par. So at that point, at the end of the day, it's like, do I really want to have to wait for the updates to fix the anti-cheat problems with the E-cores? Because no one in their right mind is going to go out and spend $630 on a Ultra 9 and then go in the BIOS and turn off all 16 E-cores so they can neuter their CPU and turn it into an 8-core, 8-thread, no hyper-threading CPU. No one is going to do that. That is like a non-negotiable. I call that a non-negotiable. So if you're buying an Ultra 9, you are using those E-cores. So the question is, do I really want to wait around for all these fixes? If someone's doing this for like work, no. They're going to want the most consistent experience. And that is the reason why ultimately the 9950X is the most consistent performer out of all of these. So that would be my recommendation. $4K, wouldn't you go with a thread? I mean, you could go with a Threadripper, but you're talking about a completely different market segment. So you could do Threadripper, But do you really need to is the question. But yes, you're right. Threadripper is an option. Now it's going to be way more expensive. The entry point into Threadripper, like unless you live near a micro center, you're going to be spending a lot of money on the lowest end entry level Threadripper compared to the highest end AMD Ryzen CPU. So it's like it really, yeah, that's where it's like, okay, yes, Threadripper, but again, Threadripper requires expensive RDIMM DDR5 registered DIMM. Threadripper doesn't use typical DDR5 UDIMM. So the entry level, the entry point into Threadripper is significantly steeper than getting any random Ryzen 9 or Intel i9 or Ultra 9 for that matter. So, the point I'm making is when I look at this, it's like seriously, see the thing is, guys, everybody's harping on how good the 7800X3D is. Yes, it's the fastest. But like I said earlier, this is the reason why I don't compare a 7800X3D to a Ultra 9 or an i9 or even a Ryzen 9, because eventually I'll show them in benchmarks like at the end, but I don't consider, like, if I'm going to build an all-in-one computer to do like all kinds of compute tasks and also play games on it, that would not be the 7800X3. That would not be the best choice for me. After looking at all these results, it's pretty clear to me that the best choice is actually the 9950X. Now, if the 9950X3D existed today, then definitely that one would be worth considering. But that's not out today, and we're not talking about future products. So, just from looking at this, it's like, okay, the best choice, most consistent, is for someone who is going to be using a 4K monitor. 9950X is looking really, really good after looking at these Intel reviews. Do you think 9950X 3D will do better in gaming this time than the... I have no idea. I don't know. We can only speculate on that. But I do believe that the 9950X 3D is definitely worth considering if you're on a 4K monitor and you're doing a bunch of different things with your computer. So, but it just so happens today, the most consistent performer is the 9950X. So to me, that is like, if someone's looking at the Core Ultra 9, they also need to look at the 9950X, because I think that one is probably a better choice ultimately, and it gives you upgradability if you buy a motherboard that supports it. So those are the main reasons why I kind of think that that's the best choice. Yeah. So, and the reality is most content creators, or most people that are seriously doing that, are using 4K monitors. So a lot of this stuff, talk about 1440p and all this stuff. Like, I did a whole like section on how game developers don't care about 1440p, and I stand by that. Game developers only really look at 1080p because that's the majority. Globally speaking, that is the majority, and they look at 4K because that is the console's upscale target resolution. That is the target output resolution on console, and it is also 4K is the streaming resolution for media consumption going forward. Look at Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, all the stream providers, how they try to upsell people to the 4K streaming service. You know what I'm saying? And then like the whole like HD Blu-ray, all this stuff, it's like 4K, right? Like all the media, they try to sell you 4K TVs, 4K OLED, 4K OLED TV, all this 4K this, 4K that. That is the reason why game developers definitely focus. There is a focus on 4K. There's also a focus on 1080p when it comes to minimum. That's why when you look at like requirements for upcoming games, the 1440p are always the most vague, like inconsistent. It's like an afterthought. It's like developers put so much effort on coming up with the minimum requirement for 1080p and the maximum requirement for 4K, but then when it comes to 1440p, it's like they'll leave it so open-ended. They'll be like, to play 1440p, you need to be on a RX 6800 or an RTX 3070 Ti medium setting 30 FPS. That's what they'll say. That's what they'll say, and it's like, well, what? Like, what do I need for like ultra 1440p? So, you know, that's why it's like 1440p is kind of a joke right now. Yeah. Developers don't care about it, and content creators don't use it. So, and the majority of the world, the people playing games globally, 1080p is still the de facto standard. Most underrated CPU for me is the Ryzen 7900 non-X3D. Yeah, dude, and that thing comes with a really good stock cooler. That thing comes with the Wraith Prism cooler too, which is a very nice stock cooler. Yeah, that is definitely an underrated CPU. They have to because the charts will be the same at 4K. Wait, what are we talking about? Do you think running a game at 4K and OBS at the same time would be better on the not really, because typically you'd be using the GPU to encode the stream anyway. You could use the CPU. If you do use the CPU, then absolutely yes. The 950X3D will be better. But most people don't use that anymore. 950X actually available though? Yes, it's available. I mean, in my area, it's like readily available. It's like all over the place. Wait, 950X is sold out, guys? For real? This is the first I've heard of like 9950X being out of stock. Was there a run on that processor? Wait, I think you're right. What? Huh? No way. Hold on. It's really sold out? Oh, wait. No, it's available. It's available at Micro Center. For a second, I thought, whoa, is it... Oh, well, it's sold out on Amazon. If it's on... If it has a weird number, like, if it's, like, 671, that's a third-party seller. That's not actually Amazon. Micro Center has it for the regular 649. Arrow Lake caused the wrong sort of havoc. You know what we need right now? We need CPU mining to take off again. Although that will cause all the... See, the thing with crypto is crypto never impacts X3D. Like, X3D is actually not bad for crypto, but crypto likes multi-thread and high clocks. So, the best CPU for crypto mining is the 9950X. But it's expensive. So crypto people, the crypto bros always buy either the 7950X, the 5950X, or any of the 12 cores, like the 7900, the 5900X. The crypto bros go for those CPUs. It's always the Ryzen CPUs, because those are very good at crypto, hence why I said they're very good at cybersecurity. Well, we found what Intel Core Ultra is good at, guys. We found exactly what the use case for Intel Core Ultra. I'm actually glad we found it. Actually, well, Tech Power Up did all the work. Science and research. Science and research. Big Pharma. Who would have thought that Core Ultra is good at Big Pharma? Man. The one thing that it excels at. Pat Gelsinger. Dr. Pat. Wait, he's not. Oh, wait, Dr. Pat. Wait, what? Yeah, he's like, yes! it's like Big Pharma victory. The victory goes to Core Ultra. Yes! Sounds like an artificial price raise. Price raise due to availability and lack of production of the 9950X. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if AMD already ended production of the Zen 4. It wouldn't make sense for AMD to still be manufacturing at least the non-X3D. Maybe the low power, like the 7700, the 7900, those CPUs, because those are good, like, office PCs, I guess. But then you go and you look at the benchmarks for the antivirus, and then it's like cybersecurity. It's like all the AMD. Like, look at this. The whole first part of this, it's like, it's just a whole wall of Ryzen. And then you see, like, down here peeking out of the bottom, you have the 14900K. And it's like, where's the new ones? And they're like, oh, they're down here with the DDR4 Ryzens from 4 years ago. This is so weird. Antivirus scans. Man, who would have thought that? Wait, hold on. It only takes 33 seconds to run an AVAS scan on 750X. Well, okay. To the credit, though, it's not that much longer. It's like you got to wait an extra 10 seconds. PCB design. The, what is this? Speech or text recognition. Yeah. Man, that is funny though. The science and research, the science and medical stuff, the Intel Ultra is so good at that, and then the like genome sequencing. I don't know if they ever intended that to be the case though. But this is such a weird launch. Like, let's look at some of these other reviews just briefly here. So, okay, this is the one from TechSpot. TechSpot, also known as Hardware Unboxed on YouTube. So this is their written review. So like they show here, if you're running UDIM, which is regular DDR5, the official supported maximum speed is DDR5 5600. This is exactly what I will be using to test my Intel Core Ultra 7. I will be using DDR5 5600 for the review. Then later on, we will look at higher speed RAM, but not for the review. That will be like an overclock video. Because I only ever run the RAM at the official supported speed when it comes to a stock review. So it will be Intel enforced defaults on the BIOS. It'll be DDR5 5600, and it'll be the same for all the other CPUs. So the 13 gen, that also is DDR5 5600. Alder Lake 12700K, if we're talking DDR5, that will be DDR5 4800, because that is the maximum supported speed on Alder Lake. And then for Zen 5, it will be 5600. And for Zen 4, like a 7800 X3D, it will be 5200. Because that is the maximum supported speed on the older AMD CPU. Alright, all I want to see here... Actually, what did they use for their test? So they used... Oh, they use the exact same motherboard that I have. Okay. Oh, are they using a 360 AIO? What are they testing the RAM at? See, I don't like how they test with such inconsistent RAM speeds. Like 7200? Who's using 7200 DDR5? That's CL34. And then 8200 CL40? This is not a good way to review something because it's like if somebody. I mean, the problem with this is if they're gonna do like 8200 on one CPU, they need to do 8200 on all the CPUs. Because as soon as you're running it outside of the stock official speed, now it's not actually. Now it's not a fair comparison anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you establish consistency of results if you're running one CPU with like really fast DDR5 and another CPU with average DDR5, and then your older Intel CPU might be on another speed of DDR5? So that, to me, that just kind of like makes this kind of a mixed bag of inconsistent results. So like, I don't agree with this testing methodology. Yeah, see, like 82 and 72, like, okay, but where's the stock speed? Like, this doesn't make much sense. So, I don't know. This is kind of a dumb review, whatever. Let's see. Guru 3D, how did they do theirs? See, as soon as I see someone saying, oh, well, we tested it at like 7200, well, you need to test all of them at 7200 if you're going to do that. Otherwise, you need to use stock speed. The other thing, too, is the task manager and hardware info lists the CPUs in the order in which they are actually laid out on the silicon. So with the older CPU, the P cores were all in one half of the CPU, then the E cores were all bunched up at the bottom. Yeah, that's not a good way to test. You need to test like out of box stock though, because that doesn't give anybody an idea of what is the default performance. You know what I'm saying? Like if someone's gonna test 7200 DDR5, that's not stock. That's an overclock. That's overclocked RAM. That's already kind of invalid data. So, well, I mean, you wouldn't even test at 6000. Like, see, the problem with this is that. Well, hold up. Where's the. Okay, see, let's look at this. This is already wrong because this shouldn't be tested at 6000. This is already overclocked. This Ryzen 7000 should be tested at DDR5 5200, not 6000. So this is already wrong. This one should be at 3200, not 3600. This is also wrong. This one is completely wrong on both ones. This should be tested at 5600, or if they're going to test with CUDIM, they should be testing at 6400 CUDIM. That is the correct way to test this. So this is completely irrelevant. 8200, 7200, this is like pointless. Okay, and then these are also completely wrong. The 12th gen should be tested at DDR5 4800, and the 13 and 14 should be tested at DDR5 5600, because that is stock out-of-box settings. That is Intel's officially supported settings. Testing at 7200 is not supported. So this is wrong. So all of this is tested wrong. Like, this is all different things. Like 3600 is not the official speed for Ryzen 5000. 6000 is not the official speed for Ryzen 7000. And where is Ryzen 9000? Was Ryzen 9000 not tested at all? I guess it wasn't. So, yeah, kind of not a very good review as far as I'm concerned. Like, this is certainly not how I would test the product. This would be one of those where it's like, this is kind of like, how should I say this? This is like an overclocked test result, because this is overclocked, this is overclocked, that's obviously overclocked, and that's overclocked, this is overclocked. All of it's overclocked. None of it's stock. None of this is stock. It's not stock on AMD, it's not stock on Intel. It's completely incorrect testing methodology, but whatever. Yeah, that's not how you test. Let's see how PC World did theirs. They just start showing, okay, what's the testing methodology? Testing, test bench. Like, do they just not say that at all? Okay, you just and they refer to it as 15th gen. I mean, that's politically incorrect. I have no idea how this was tested. Is there a section talking about what it was actually tested with? Oh, great. So it's like I have no idea what this used. Okay, you can use more. So wait, what? The first chiplet which supports it? No, is this? What is this? Is this tested 10? Maybe it's in the video. I didn't watch the video, but still, like, what? Okay, well, they don't actually say in the article, which is kind of yeah. See, that's the problem with looking at these different reviews. But in general, you're gonna, even regardless of people testing it wrong or right, you know, whatever, like the end result is gonna be the same. At the end of the day, it's gonna end up looking, in general, they're gonna come to the same conclusion. Remember that if Intel catches you using XMP, they might refuse your CPU RMA for being. Well, I mean, this guy obviously used it. I mean, this guy literally used it on everything, even on this. I mean, look, even the Ryzen 5000 was using XMP. Right, this is basically XMP on DDR4. That's XMP on Ryzen 5000, boys. The one who always tests it with the actual proper way is Computer Base. Hold on. Let's look at Computer Base. Okay. Where is... How do I translate this? It's in German. Well, whatever. I'll just have to look at it in German. But these guys, they test it correctly. Where is the... Which one? This one? Okay. No. Yeah, see? These guys test correctly. This is how you test. This is how you do proper testing. At least Computer Base knows how to test things correctly. So they test a 7800 X3D with DDR5 5200. This is correct. This is a valid test. 14900K at DDR5 5600. This is correct. This is proper testing. Ryzen 9 9950X, DDR5 5600. This is correct. This is proper testing. And again, the Intel Ultra 9 at DDR5 5600. Again, all three of them, Raptor Lake, Zen 5, and the new Intel Arrow Lake, all of them officially support 5600 as the official supported speed. That means if you have a problem with your computer and you think you might have a hardware problem and you open a support ticket with AMD or Intel and you tell them what you're running, and if you tell them you're running your RAM at anything above 5600, you know what they're going to do to you? They will close the ticket. They will close the support ticket. So you will have to run your test. You'll have to run your computer at these speeds, and if you still have a problem, then they will help you. But if you're not running them at these speeds, they will not help you. They'll refuse to support you if you have a computer problem. So Ryzen 7000 is 5200 on a 4-DIMM motherboard. Same thing with these three, 5600. Now, if the 12900K was included, the 12900K would be running at DDR5 4800 because because Alder Lake supports up to 4800 because it was the very first DDR5 memory controller from Intel. So AMD's first generation was a little bit better at 5200. AMD's second generation is basically the same as Intel's second generation at 5600. So that is how you test. This is the correct way to test. This is exactly how I will test when I do my own review of the Intel CPU. This is how you get out-of-box, guaranteed, baseline performance results. This is how you do an apples-to-apples comparison. You do not test with one CPU running at 8200, another CPU running at 7200, another CPU running at 6000, another CPU running at No, that is not how you... If they're going to do that, if someone's going to test outside the official spec, then the only proper test is all of them need to be at the same speed. All of them need to be at the same speed. Meaning all of them need to be at 6000, or all of them need to be at 6400, or all of them need to be at some number where all of them are the same. And the reason why 8000 is not a good idea is because the Raptor Lake CPUs can't, not all of them can do 8000. Not all of them have the best memory controller. Case in point, my 1300K with a Gigabyte Aorus Master Z790 cannot do 8000. It won't work. It won't boot into Windows. So, meanwhile, my AMD CPUs, all of them can do 8000 on even the cheapest motherboard. So that is the reason why I don't agree with testing higher memory speeds. At least for a apples to apples comparison. Now, I guess what I would be okay with is like if all of them are doing the same speed, like if all of them are doing 6000, that's fine. But once you go way up there, like 8000, then it's kind of like, okay, well, can the CPU actually do 8000? Like my 1300K can't do that, so it's like I wouldn't choose 8000, even though all my AMD CPUs can do 8000. My Intel Raptor Lake can't. My Alder Lake definitely can't. Maybe the new Intel Core Ultra can, but I would not test it that way. So this is how you test properly. This is out of box. This is a good way of testing, and this gives the most accurate percentage scaling. You know, like this is actually. That's actually quite good. And what's funny is their results line up with, they almost line up with Tech Power Up. So that is good. Okay, so that's basically it. So I guess that covers everything that I wanted to talk to you about Arrow Lake. The main thing I wanted to tell you guys about was the buying experience. So, where's the Ultra 9? Where is the Ultra 9? Completely missing in action. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know where it is. Where are the MSI motherboards? Where are the ASRock motherboards? I don't know. This feels like a really weird paper launch. My local Micro Center had one Ultra 5. Literally one Ultra 5. 0 Ultra 9s, one Ultra 5, and a whole bunch of Ultra 7s. Maybe they gave all the reviewers the Ultra 5s and 9s because all the retailers only had the 7. I don't know what happened there. It definitely felt like the weirdest Intel launch this is the weirdest CPU launch I have ever experienced. Although, to be fair, the Zen 5 CPU launch was kind of a joke as well. Like, AMD launched a bunch of CPUs. They delayed it. They made some of them go a week early and some of them go a week later. And then none of the motherboards launched together with the CPUs. And people were like, oh, well, you can do a BIOS update. Well, you know how many people went and bought the Micro Center bundle and returned it because they thought they had a defective motherboard because they had to do a BIOS update? Yeah. So the AMD one was plagued with kind of like dumb problems that could have easily been avoided. The Intel launch probably feels like it should have launched, like it should have been. They should have postponed the launch on the Intel one by like a month or two, to avoid all the weird problems with anti-cheat and application compatibility things with the E-cores. I don't know. Like it's. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I haven't built my computer yet, so I will be doing the live stream build tomorrow for the Ultra 7 265K. So we will be building this PC. I will be doing a lot of my own testing, so I will see if the reviewers' complaints are accurate. I assume they are, but I'll have to test it for myself. Norway plus Denmark have 0 Core Ultra in stock. Like 0? Like none of them? Yeah, but the thing is, Shadow, like there's literally no Ultra 9. I woke up and checked all the listings first thing in the morning, and the Ultra 9 was literally like nowhere. Like Newegg didn't have it. Amazon obviously is not going to have it if Newegg doesn't have it. And then Micro Center didn't have it. So, yeah, I don't know what happened there. That's kind of weird. Multi-threading's pretty good. It's good at genome sequencing. Power consumption's on par with Zen 5 overall. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I guess let's talk about the rumored 9800X3D. So there's a new benchmark that leaked out. Ryzen 7 9800X3D up to 22% faster in Geekbench versus the 7800X3D. So one thing I will say, we are at a point now where first AMD disappointed with its lackluster Zen 5 launch. Now Intel probably disappointed even more with its lackluster and almost paper launch of the Core Ultra series. So that leaves the 9800X3D as our last hope. The last hope for the PC gamers of 2024. There's one more CPU to launch to come in and save the day. This literally feels like the Dragon Ball Z Majin Buu arc. First, we have a complete fail of the Z fighters against Buu in the form of Zen 5. Then we have the new Intel Core Ultra imploding as a paper launch and just fizzling out like Majin Vegeta and his atomic explosion against the fat Majin Buu. That's basically the Core Ultra launch. So now we only have one more hope. The 9800X3D. Basically, if I had to summarize what the 9800X3D represents, or what anime character represents, is the personification of the Ryzen 7 9800X3D. It is Ultimate Gohan. The 9800X3D is Ultimate Gohan. It is the only remaining Z fighter that can save the day and put Super Buu in his place. So it's all on the 9800X3D to come in and save the day. Because Majin Vegeta failed. The rest of the Z fighters failed. All we have left is Ultimate Gohan. I mean, the 9950X is basically SSJ3 Goku. You know, like, just, it's kind of there. It's like the best all-rounder, but it can't quite do it by itself. So, yeah. I mean, we basically need Ultimate Gohan, aka Ryzen 7 9800X3D, to come to our rescue and save all the PC gamers from the disappointing year of 2024 hardware release, personified as Majin Buu. You just found the ASRock Z890 Taichi on Newegg, and it has 2 DIMM slots for OC. That is not the regular Taichi. That is known as the Taichi OCF. We covered that last week, and that is a very nice overclockers motherboard. That's probably the best overclockers motherboard. But just to look at this, oh my goodness. The single core score is... Wait, is that for real? This doesn't look photoshopped to me. Base frequency 4.7 gigahertz. Maximum frequency 5.3 gigahertz. So the rumors were that the boost turbo would be around 5.2. So this could be like a single... The top 2 cores could probably hit 5.3 in light thread. So this looks legit. 48 gigabytes of DDR5. That's probably an 8000 kit, if I had to guess. 3300 in Geekbench single thread. This is in line with what I scored with my Zen 5 CPU. Multi-core, that's similar to a 9700X. So this is actually, I mean, that looks pretty good for an 8-core. Where does that line up here, though? What was it? 3005. Well, it would be like right around the 14900K. Yeah. Multi-thread. What was the multi-threading? 18,000 something? 18,000. So that would be somewhere around... Oh, right there. Oh, they do have it. Well, they didn't show it in the single thread. Oh, yeah, they did. It's right here. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's in line with the 9700X. That actually looks believable. That multi-thread, though... Wait a minute. Where's the... How can the multi-thread be that much better than the 9700X? That to me is kind of weird. How is it that good? Well, it's still, there's still a clear delineation between that and the higher thread count. So that could be real, although I wonder if that's overclocked. Yeah, Intel Core Ultra and Zen 5 are similar in single thread. I wonder what this is actually at stock. That's the thing. I have to go back and look at my own review, because I have my own numbers for Geekbench for the 9950X and the 9700X. And the 13900K. So I can go and see how if this is actually legit. This looks like it's correct, though. 7950X3, I don't think they included it. 7950X3D would be somewhere around here though. It would be like in here somewhere. It would be under 3000. That does look pretty good. Someone overclocked it though. There's no way it's gonna be doing 5.6 on all cores. That's definitely an overclock. They're using like B clock overclocking to do that. There's no way. Someone said the what? The video cards. Yeah, the B clock is a good way to do it. That's pretty good, guys. But see, this is what I mean. Like, this is the other thing too. Like, if someone was sitting on an AM5 motherboard, they don't have to buy, and they want one of these, they don't have to buy another motherboard. They can just reuse the same motherboard. They just update the BIOS. So this is one of the nice perks of the AMD platform, which is why it's easier to recommend for the average person, just because of the longevity and the upgradability on the socket. You know, that's like it's a huge selling point for a lot of people, just because of like, hey, it's like if you bought a Micro Center 7700X bundle 2 years ago, and you've been on the fence on waiting for the next generation rather than buying a 7800X3D, like it's gonna be worth the wait at this point based off of these results. Because not only does it get way better single core and multi-core than the 7800X3D, you couple that with the fact that it has the V-Cache, and you know it's going to be doing better. So this is the sort of thing that makes these sort of CPUs, or in this platform, actually a very, very strong contender in the gaming market. Hence why I said this is Ultimate Gohan. This feels like an Ultimate Gohan CPU. You're on your third chip of X570. Yeah, X570, you probably started with a 3000 series. Then you went to a 5000 and maybe a 5000 X3D. Yeah. Goku is a 9950X. We already mentioned him. He's basically SSJ3 holding everything off before Ultimate Gohan shows up to save the day. That's what's going on. Saitama's not here because we don't do non-DBZ references when we're talking about CPUs. Saitama is going to be more of like GPU stuff. 9800X3D is Ultra Instinct Goku. No, I wouldn't say that's Ultra Instinct Goku. We're not that far into the arc. We're not that far into the story yet. So, no. Goku is a 9, guys. Like, Goku is Ryzen 9. Gohan is Ryzen 7. So, if we're going to start talking about Ultra Instinct and stuff, that's going to be like 9950X3D. That's like next year. We're not that far into the season, if that makes sense. That's later on. Okay? Like I told you guys, the 9950X is Goku. We've already established that. Technically speaking, if you want to talk about Majin Vegeta, he's actually the 13900K. Well, okay, Vegeta Super Saiyan 2 in the Buu arc is the 13900K. But when he goes Majin Vegeta, he becomes 14900K. And when he goes full 100% Majin Vegeta crazy mode, that's 14900KS when he does his atomic explosion to try to defeat Majin Buu. That is what Vegeta is. Vegeta is 14900K. You wish you know what I'm talking about. Man, I bet. See, that's one of the things. I don't always do the DBZ references because I know that not all my viewers will understand the reference. But I feel like the people who get the reference probably find this very entertaining. Just like personifying CPUs as Dragon Ball Z characters. Anyone tested 9950X overclock to the moon without SMT on PUBG? I don't know. There are a few people. There are a couple of my viewers that do have the 9950X. I have the 950X, but I have not tested it with SMT turned off. You never felt dumber in your life. Wait, so if you guys feel like you're not understanding the Dragon Ball Z reference, I don't think that means that you're dumber. That just means that you never watched the show or you never read the manga. That's all that means. I wouldn't say that that means you're dumb. Like Super Vegito? No. Super Vegito is okay, that's later on. That's in the future. Well, I think a number of people understand the reference. Boomer translation. So, okay, basically, so the main character of the story of Dragon Ball Z, well, actually Dragon Ball. We'll just say Dragon Ball Z for simplicity. The main character's name is Goku. In what I'm doing here is I'm basically saying that the Ryzen 9 is Goku. So Goku as a character is the personification of the Ryzen 9. His son, his eldest son, his name is Gohan. That is the Ryzen 7. So the Ryzen 7 is Gohan. Okay, does that make sense? So think of this. This is like the son of the 9950X. If we're treating these processors as actual characterizations or characters in a story. And the rival, Goku's rival, aka the rival of the Ryzen 9, is a character named Vegeta, and that is the i9. And the reason why I'm using their names, because Goku's colors are typically orange. He wears orange clothing, and that's the reason, that's the color of Ryzen. And Vegeta wears blue. Hence why I choose Vegeta to represent the Intel Core i9. Goten is the Ryzen 5. SMT off is key in games with 9950X on CCD0. But process lasso. Okay, well, that's an interesting idea. I could try that and see how it runs as an 8-core, 8-thread. Or no, not an 8-core, a 16-core, 16-thread. That is an interesting idea. Who is 285K? Who is a failure character that tried something new? I'll have to think about that. I'd have to think about that. Who would that be? I was thinking Trunks. Trunks might be Core Ultra, but I have to think a little bit more about that. Yeah, we have a lot of testing to do on the Core Ultra. I kind of want to see if all the claims about the blue screening and the anti-cheat problems are true. Snapdragon? Oh, I mean, Snapdragon is definitely one of the villains in the story. Snapdragon is probably... honestly speaking, Snapdragon would probably be like Cell or Frieza or something. It would be one of the villains. Definitely. Because the whole point of AMD and Intel forming that committee, the X86, whatever they were calling it, the ecosystem partner thing. That was to team up against ARM. And Snapdragon is one of the ARM members. So it's like, it's one of those things. So Snapdragon is definitely going to be one of the villains from Dragon Ball Z. Core Ultra might be Trunks, though. I'm not sure which one, though. Yeah, I've been saying the 9950X is a very good CPU. First of all, the one thing that impressed me a lot about the 9950X is that it is a very nice overclocking CPU. You can get a very nice overclock on this, especially if you have a B clock motherboard, like the Hero that I'm using, for example. So overclocking this is a whole lot of fun. My hope is that the Core Ultra is also a good overclocker, because the 1400K the 1300K is god awful because it's too much electricity. So it's like I don't even bother overclocking it because it's terrible. Because if I can't overclock it with my Noctua D15, it is completely pointless. So I never overclocked it. I ran it I always power limited it and like under volt. Well, not under. I didn't really undervolt it. I just like power limited it through the roof, so we couldn't really do much. And then the 7000 series also was like super hard to maintain the temperature because it would shoot up to like 95 Celsius all the time. So it was extremely hard to get any sort of meaningful gains with the 7000 series Ryzen. But 9000 series is so much more fun to overclock because it uses less power and it doesn't heat up as quickly as the previous generation. So my hope is Intel's Core Ultra is the same, like Zen 5 in that regard. Well, anyway, guys, I think that's a good stopping point. The main thing is Ultimate Gohan's coming in 2 weeks, so we're gonna see how the landscape changes. Is there Dragon Ball Z dude that blows himself up? You mean the villain? Yes, Cell. Well, there's also Vegeta when he was Majin Vegeta, and that's basically the 14900KS. So and the 14900KS did have the whole like CPU dying problem earlier this year. So hence why that's Majin Vegeta. Anyway, that's probably going to be it for this stream. 2 weeks from now, we're going to be seeing the 9800X3D hit store shelves. I think that's going to be another landscape changer when that shows up, but we'll see what happens if that actually does anything. Will you do open beta test stream? How do I get into that? I really want to be in on the Monster Hunter Wilds open beta, but how do you... Is there a thing I have to do to apply for that? I need to look into that because I really, really want to play Monster Hunter Wild. This is coming soon, but that's going to be good. I really need to look into the whole Monster Hunter Wilds open beta because I really, really want in on that. Alright, guys. Well, that's going to be it for this stream. We'll be doing the live build for the Intel system tomorrow with the memory from RK and see if we can do the 8400 on the Asus board. Until then, take care, and I will see you guys on the next live stream, which is probably going to be within the next 24 hours. So until then, get subscribed to the channel if you're not subscribed already, so you can hit the bell icon and get notified when I go live with that build. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next week. Thanks.